When crime lord Adrian Cross spotted the woman who vanished 3 years ago sitting on a park bench, he expected answers. What he got instead shattered every wall he'd ever built. At her feet, two emerald-eyed toddlers played in the autumn leaves, twins who shared his exact dimpled smile, his sharp jawline, his unmistakable features. In one heartbeat, the most dangerous man in New York became the most vulnerable. She'd run, she'd hidden his children, and now, as their eyes met across the distance, both knew that everything, power, empire, survival itself, was about to change forever. If you're ready to dive into this story of secrets, power, and impossible choices, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The October wind carried the scent of rain through Central Park, cutting through the carefully maintained gardens with the kind of cold that promised winter wasn't far behind. Adrian Cross walked alone, a rare occurrence for a man whose very name commanded empires and inspired fear across 5 boroughs. His security detail maintained their invisible perimeter 300 yards back, close enough to respond, far enough to grant the illusion of solitude their boss so rarely requested. He'd built this moment into his schedule the way some men carved out time for golf or therapy. Tuesday mornings, weather permitting, belonged to him alone. 2 hours where the weight of running New York's most formidable criminal organization could rest, however briefly, on someone else's shoulders. The irony wasn't lost on him. Most men in his position lived in constant paranoia, surrounded by armed guards, never exposing themselves to the vulnerability of open spaces. But Adrian had learned something his rivals never quite grasped. True power meant having nothing left to fear. He'd already survived 3 assassination attempts, dismantled 2 rival families, and buried every person who'd ever threatened what was his. What remained to lose? The path curved past the Bethesda fountain, morning joggers creating a steady stream of colorful athletic wear and expensive headphones. Adrian kept his pace measured, hands in the pockets of his tailored wool coat, his mind already shifting through the afternoon's agenda. A sit-down with the Lucchese captain who'd been moving product through Brooklyn without clearance. Contract negotiations with the union representative who thought he could play both sides. The quarterly reports his financial officer insisted required his personal review. Then he saw her. She sat on a stone bench 30 yards ahead, profile turned toward the fountain, completely still in a way that made her stand out from the constant motion surrounding her. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a worn canvas jacket that had seen better years. Hands folded in her lap with the kind of careful stillness that spoke of someone trying very hard not to draw attention. Adrian's feet stopped moving before his brain caught up to recognition. Elena. Elena Moore, who'd served coffee at the diner he'd owned 3 years ago. Elena, who'd had a smile that transformed her entire face and a laugh that could fill a room. Elena, who'd looked at him like he was just a man, not a monster, not a myth. Elena, who'd vanished without a trace in the middle of the night, leaving behind only an empty apartment and questions he'd never quite stopped asking. His heart did something strange in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Something that resembled pain or hope, or maybe just the echo of being 25 and stupid enough to think feelings mattered. She hadn't noticed him yet, her attention focused on something below his line of sight. Adrian's instincts, honed by decades of reading threats and opportunities, screamed that something was wrong with this picture. Elena Moore didn't belong in Central Park on a Tuesday morning. She belonged to a ghost life, a closed chapter, a past he'd sealed away in the locked rooms of his memory. He started walking again, drawn forward by a gravity he couldn't name and wouldn't fight. Each step brought details into sharper focus, the dark circles under her eyes, the threadbare quality of her clothes, the tension in her shoulders that spoke of someone carrying weight they'd been bearing far too long. 10 yards away, he opened his mouth to call her name. Then he saw them. 2 children played at her feet, small forms bundled in mismatched jackets that looked purchased from thrift stores. They couldn't have been more than 2 years old, stumbling through the leaves with the unsteady determination of toddlers, still mastering the concept of walking. A boy and a girl, their laughter bright and clear in the morning air. Adrian's world tilted on its axis. The boy looked up, chasing a red leaf that had caught his attention, and Adrian's knees nearly gave out. Emerald green eyes. Exactly the shade his own had been before time and violence had darkened them to something harder. The same unusual color his mother used to say came from her side of the family, recessive genes that showed up once every few generations like a signature. The girl turned, reaching for her brother, and Adrian saw the dimples. His dimples. The asymmetric pair that marked the left side of his face when he smiled, something he did so rarely now that most people had forgotten he possessed them. The angle of their jawlines, the arch of their eyebrows, the shape of their small hands. Every instinct he'd spent 40 years developing screamed the impossible truth. Those children were his. Elena's head snapped up, some sixth sense alerting her to his presence. Their eyes met across the distance, and Adrian watched recognition flash across her face, followed immediately by something that looked like terror. She stood so fast she knocked over the bag beside her, its contents spilling across the bench. Her hands flew to gather the children, pulling them close with the fierce protectiveness of a mother bear sensing danger. Adrian. His name on her lips came out barely above a whisper, carried to him on the wind like an accusation. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stand there like a statue while his entire understanding of reality reorganized itself around this single, devastating truth. They're mine. Not a question. A statement delivered in the same tone he used to pass death sentences. Elena's face went white. Please. Answer me. His voice cut across the space between them, quiet enough not to draw attention, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Elena, answer the question. The little girl, his daughter, buried her face in Elena's neck, frightened by the stranger's intensity. The boy, his son, stared at Adrian with curious, fearless eyes. Yes. The word came out broken, barely audible. Yes, they're yours. The ground seemed to shift beneath Adrian's feet. Somewhere in the logical part of his brain, mathematics fell into place. He'd last seen Elena 3 years and 3 months ago. The twins appeared to be just over 2. The timeline aligned with brutal precision. You were pregnant. Each word emerged carefully controlled, the only thing keeping him from the rage beginning to build in his chest. When you left. Adrian, please, not here. You were carrying my children and you ran. The controls started cracking. People were beginning to glance their way, sensing the tension. You disappeared. I had every resource at my disposal searching for you. I thought you were dead. I thought... His voice broke. Adrian Cross, who hadn't shown weakness in public since he was 15 years old, felt his composure shattering. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I had to. You don't understand. I had to... Had to what? The words came out harsh, years of buried emotion crystallizing into fury. Had to steal my children? Had to make me a father without my knowledge? Had to let me believe you just decided I wasn't worth a goodbye? You were going to get us killed. The words burst from her like they'd been held back too long. Your world was going to destroy us, and I couldn't let them grow up in that darkness. I couldn't watch them become what you are. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Adrian became aware of his security detail moving closer, responding to his elevated vitals via the discreet monitoring system they maintained. He held up one hand, signaling them to hold position. This conversation needed to happen, but not here. Not in front of strangers and morning joggers, and his children who were staring at him like he was the monster Elena's words painted him to be. We need to talk. He forced his voice back to something resembling calm. Properly, somewhere private. No. Elena pulled the twins closer. No, we're not going anywhere with you. Those are my children. They're my children too, and I won't let you... Let me... Something dangerous flashed across Adrian's features. You think you have a choice here? You think you can keep them from me now that I know? Elena's chin lifted with defiance, he remembered, the same steel that had made him notice her in the first place. Try to take them. Try to use your power and your money and your threats. I'll disappear again, and this time you'll never find us. I found you once. By accident. Pure chance. Her voice shook but held firm. I've gotten very good at being invisible, Adrian. You taught me that. You and your terrifying world. I won't let you pull them into it. I won't let them become part of your empire of violence and fear. The boy, his son, tugged at Elena's sleeve. Mama? Who's the man? Adrian's heart cracked clean through. Mama. The child called her Mama, and Adrian was just the man. A stranger. an outsider to the lives he'd unknowingly created. Elena's expression softened as she looked down at the twins. Someone Mama used to know, sweetheart. We're going home now. You're not going anywhere. The command came out harder than Adrian intended, and Elena flinched. He cursed himself internally, trying to find a way to navigate this conversation that didn't involve terrifying the mother of his children or traumatizing the toddlers watching with wide, confused eyes. Elena. He tried again, forcing his voice gentler. Please, I won't hurt you. I would never hurt you, or them. But you can't ask me to just walk away from this. Why not? Tears streaked her face now. You walked away from everything good in your life years ago. You chose this path, Adrian. You chose power over peace, fear over love, control over connection. Why should these children suffer for your choices? They're mine. They're mine too. I'm the one who carried them. I'm the one who stayed up nights when they had fevers. I'm the one who sang them to sleep and taught them to walk and held them when they cried. You have money and power and an empire. You don't need them. Need? The word came out raw. You think this is about need? Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so uncharacteristically uncertain that his security detail shifted nervously in his peripheral vision. He was losing control of this conversation, losing control of his emotions, losing control of everything that had kept him alive and powerful for 40 years. What are their names? The question seemed to catch Elena off guard. She hesitated, some protective instinct warring with the resignation creeping into her features. Finally, she whispered, Alessia and Marcus. Alessia and Marcus. Adrian repeated the names like they were sacred. His daughter, his son. Two human beings who carried his DNA, his features, his blood, and he'd never even known they existed. The little girl, Alessia, peeked out from Elena's neck, studying Adrian with curiosity beginning to overcome fear. Marcus had already lost interest in the adult drama, returning his attention to the scattered leaves. How old are they? 2 years and 4 months. Adrian did the math again, confirming what he already knew. You found out you were pregnant and ran. I didn't find out until after I left. Elena's voice dropped. I ran because I saw what your world really looked like. I saw the violence. I saw the way your mother looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. I heard her tell you I was a distraction you needed to eliminate before I became a liability. The memory hit Adrian with unexpected force. His mother. Of course, Victoria Cross, matriarch of the family, had never approved of Elena, had made it crystal clear that a waitress from Queens had no place in their world, no future with her son. She had no right. She had every right. Elena's voice rose before she caught herself, glancing at the twins. She was protecting her family, her empire. I was nobody. A girl who served coffee and couldn't tell Montrachet from Moscato. I didn't belong in your world, and we both knew it. I didn't care about that. You didn't care about anything except yourself. The words exploded from her, years of repressed emotion finally breaking free. You were so wrapped up in proving yourself to your family, building your empire, becoming the feared crime lord everyone bowed to. I was convenient. I was pretty enough to show off and simple enough not to complicate your life. But I wasn't stupid, Adrian. I saw how you looked at me when your mother was around, like you were already planning your exit strategy. The accusation stung because it held truth. He had been building his reputation then, solidifying his position. Elena had been a bright spot in a dark world, but he'd never seriously considered how she fit into his future. Then I left, Elena continued, her voice breaking. And I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks later. I was living in a roach-infested studio in Newark, working 2 jobs, barely eating. And I took that test and saw those 2 lines and I knew I couldn't tell you. Because you'd take them. You'd take my babies and raise them to be like you, cold and powerful and dangerous. You'd teach them that people are either assets or threats, that love is weakness, that family is just another word for empire. That's not fair, isn't it? Elena's tears fell freely now. Look at yourself, Adrian. Look at what you've become. You walk through parks alone because you trust no one. You have armed guards following you everywhere. You probably haven't had a genuine conversation with another human being in years. Is that what you want for them? Is that the life you'd choose for Alessia and Marcus? Adrian opened his mouth to argue and found he had no words. Because she was right. His life was violence and strategy and constant calculation. His world was one where showing emotion got you killed and trusting the wrong person ended with a bullet. But they were his children. "What's their full names?" he asked quietly. Elena hesitated. "Alicia Rose Bennett and Marcus James Bennett." "Bennett."
My grandmother's maiden name. I couldn't use more. You would have found us.
Smart. Elena had always been smarter than people gave her credit for. "Where do you live?" "I'm not telling you that." "Elena." "No." She gathered the twins, preparing to leave. "I won't make it easy for you to destroy their lives. If you want to fight me, you'll have to use every resource you have. You'll have to hunt us down like you hunt your enemies. And maybe, in doing that, you'll prove exactly why I was right to run." She turned away, Marcus in her arms, Alessia clutching her leg. Adrian's mind raced through options. He could have them followed, could have his people track their movements, identify their home, compile a complete dossier within hours, could use every tool at his disposal to take what was his by blood and right, could become exactly the monster she'd accused him of being. "Wait." Elena stopped but didn't turn around. "Please," Adrian added, the word foreign on his tongue. "Please don't run again. Give me time to process this, to figure out what comes next. I won't force anything today. I won't send people after you. Just don't disappear." She looked back over her shoulder, suspicion and hope warring on her face. "Why should I believe you?" "Because those children deserve better than parents who are enemies." The words came from someplace deep, someplace he'd thought he'd buried years ago. "Because whatever I am, whatever I've become, I don't want them to grow up in a war zone. And because you loved me once, or I'd like to think you did. And maybe that person I was with you isn't completely dead." Elena's expression crumbled. "The person you were with me was a lie, Adrian. A fantasy you played at being between business deals and territory disputes. The real you is the man everyone fears. The real you has blood on his hands and ice in his veins." "Maybe." Adrian met her eyes. "But the real me is also their father, and I'm asking you, as their mother, to give me a chance to figure out what that means." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of children's laughter from other families scattered through the park. Normal families. Families without crime empires and dangerous secrets. "One phone call," Elena finally said. "I'll give you a number where you can reach me. But you don't get their address. You don't get to know where we live. You don't get access to them until I decide if you're safe." "I would never hurt them. I know that." Her voice softened. "You'd die before you'd let anyone harm them. But sometimes the danger isn't what you do to them, Adrian. Sometimes it's what they'd become because of you." She pulled out a phone, an old model, probably a burner, and rattled off a number. Adrian committed it to memory instantly, his mind automatically filing it alongside the thousands of other crucial details he maintained. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "We need to discuss logistics, support, their future. Their future is with me. Their future involves me, whether you like it or not." Some of the steel returned to Adrian's voice. "I'm not asking permission to be their father, Elena. I'm trying to be civilized about how we navigate this situation. But make no mistake, those children are mine, and I will be part of their lives. The only question is whether we do this cooperatively or through lawyers and courts and battles that will hurt them far more than anything else." Elena's jaw tightened. "Don't threaten me." "I'm not threatening. I'm stating facts." Adrian's expression hardened. "You made choices 3 years ago that I can't undo. You robbed me of their first words, their first steps, every milestone and moment that I'll never get back. I'm trying very hard not to be angry about that, but you don't get to compound the damage by pretending you have total control here. I have every right. You have rights. I have rights. They have rights." Adrian gestured to the twins, both watching the adults with confused concern. "And right now, we're scaring them. So let's table this discussion for tomorrow, when we can talk rationally about what comes next." Elena looked down at Alessia and Marcus, seeing the tension they'd absorbed. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Tomorrow. But Adrian, if you try to take them, if you try to use your power to force this, I know, you'll disappear." Adrian's voice gentled. "I'm not going to take them. I'm just asking to know them." He watched as she gathered the children and their scattered belongings, preparing to leave. Marcus waved at him, an innocent, friendly gesture from a child who had no idea he'd just met his father. Adrian's heart constricted. "Elena." She paused. Did they ever ask about me? About their father? Her expression crumpled. Every day. They ask every single day why they don't have a daddy like the other kids. The words hit harder than any bullet. Elena walked away, the twins clutching her hands, disappearing into the morning crowd. Adrian stood frozen on the path, his entire world reorganized around two toddlers with emerald eyes and matching dimples. He became aware of Marcus, his head of security, not his son, approaching cautiously. Sir, is everything all right? Was everything all right? He just discovered he had children. Discovered that a woman he'd cared for had been so terrified of his life that she'd chosen poverty and exile over telling him she was pregnant. Discovered that for 2 years and 4 months, he'd had a son and daughter growing up without him. No, Adrian said quietly. Nothing is all right, but it's going to be. Do you need us to follow her? The offer hung in the air, tempting. He could have Elena's address within the hour, could show up at her door with lawyers and evidence of paternity and demands that couldn't be ignored, could prove every fear she'd ever had about him absolutely correct. No, Adrian decided. No surveillance, no tracking, no intervention. Marcus looked surprised. Adrian Cross always controlled every variable. Are you certain, sir? I'm certain. Adrian started walking back toward where his car waited. But I want a complete background compiled. Where she's been, how she's been surviving, everything about their life for the last 3 years. Discreetly, no direct contact. Understood, sir. As they walked, Adrian's mind was already working through implications and strategies. Elena was right about one thing. His world was dangerous. Enemies would use his children against him if they knew they existed. Rivals would see them as leverage. His own family would have opinions, expectations, demands. His mother. The thought made Adrian's jaw clench. Victoria Cross had driven Elena away with her contempt and her certainty that a waitress had no place in their world, had made it clear that Elena was disposable, replaceable, a distraction from the empire they were building. And now that distraction had given him heirs. The irony was almost amusing. Victoria had spent years pressuring Adrian to marry appropriately, to produce children who would continue the family legacy. She'd paraded eligible women past him, daughters of allies, relatives of powerful families, anyone who met her exacting standards of bloodline and benefit. And all along, he'd already had children with the one woman his mother had deemed unworthy. Adrian pulled out his phone as he reached the car, scrolling through contacts to his mother's private line. She answered on the second ring. Darling, you usually don't call until afternoon. Is something wrong? We need to talk, in person, today. A pause. Victoria Cross hadn't survived 40 years as the power behind her late husband's throne by missing undertones. What's happened? Not over the phone. I'll be there in an hour. He ended the call before she could probe further. Let her wonder, let her worry, let her prepare for whatever crisis she imagined he was bringing to her door. She'd never imagined the truth. The car slid through Manhattan traffic, Adrian's security detail forming their usual protective envelope. He stared out the window, seeing nothing, his mind replaying every second of the encounter. Alessia's face pressed into Elena's shoulder. Marcus's curious, fearless stare. Elena's tears and terror and fierce maternal protection. The accusations about what he'd become, who he was, what he represented. All of it true. All of it damning. All of it exactly why Elena had run, and why she'd stayed hidden, and why she looked at him now like he was the greatest threat her children would ever face. Adrian had spent 20 years building an empire on fear and respect, had cultivated a reputation as someone who showed no mercy, felt no regret, made decisions with cold calculation rather than messy emotion. He'd buried the parts of himself that felt deeply, cared genuinely, hoped for anything beyond power and control. He'd become exactly what the world needed him to be to survive in it. And now he had to figure out how to be a father. The impossibility of it threatened to overwhelm him. What did he know about children? About love that didn't come with conditions and strategies? About putting someone else's needs above his own interests? Nothing. He knew nothing except that those two small humans existed because of him, carried his features and his blood, and deserved better than a father who was defined by the bodies he'd buried and the enemies he'd destroyed. His phone buzzed. Marcus's name appeared, his security chief, handling the background research he'd requested. Talk to me. Preliminary information, sir. Elena Bennett has been living in Queens under that name for 3 years and 2 months. Small apartment, 2-bedroom. She works as a night shift nurse at a community clinic and picks up administrative work during the day while the twins are at a subsidized daycare. No credit cards, no significant assets, no criminal record. She's been completely off grid except for minimal documentation required for employment and the children's birth certificates. Adrian absorbed this, each detail a small knife wound. Elena working 2 jobs, living in Queens, probably somewhere rough if she could afford it on those wages. Subsidized daycare, meaning she qualified for poverty assistance. The mother of his children qualified for poverty assistance. Financial situation? Month to month, sir. She's surviving but not thriving. Medical bills from the births are still in collection. She's 3 months behind on rent. Adrian's hands clenched. Anything else? The children appear healthy, well cared for despite the circumstances. Elena's employment records show perfect attendance, no disciplinary issues. Neighbors describe her as quiet, private, devoted to the twins. There's no indication of substance abuse, neglect, or any concerns that would flag for child services. Good. Keep monitoring but maintain distance. I don't want her spooked. Understood, sir. Adrian ended the call, his mind already calculating. 3 months behind on rent. Medical bills in collection. Working herself to exhaustion to provide for children she'd chosen to raise alone rather than trust him. The judgment in that choice burned. The car pulled up to his mother's brownstone in the Upper East Side, the building that had been in the Cross family for 3 generations. Adrian stepped out, nodding to Marcus. Wait here. This conversation is private. Inside, Victoria waited in the drawing room, perfectly composed in her tailored suit, silver hair swept back in the elegant style she'd maintained for decades. At 68, she remained formidable, the iron will that had guided the family through wars and transitions and challenges that had destroyed lesser dynasties. Adrian. She rose, kissing both his cheeks in the European style she'd affected despite being born in Brooklyn. You sounded urgent. What's happened? I ran into someone today. In the park. And this requires a private emergency meeting. It does when that someone is Elena Moore. He watched the recognition flash across his mother's features, quickly suppressed. That girl you were seeing? The waitress? I thought she'd left town years ago. She did. Adrian poured himself a scotch from the crystal decanter on the sidebar. She left because she was pregnant with twins, my twins. The color drained from Victoria's face, a rare sight that gave Adrian no satisfaction. That's... Are you certain they're yours? One look and there's no doubt. They have my eyes, my features, they're mine. Victoria sank into her chair, processing. Why didn't she tell you? Why would she run? Adrian took a drink, letting the burn ground him. Because she heard you tell me I needed to eliminate the distraction. Because she saw what our world really looks like and decided poverty was safer than raising children in it. Because she was terrified, Mother, and you gave her every reason to be. You made it clear she wasn't worthy, that she didn't belong, that she was a liability I needed to handle before she complicated the business. Adrian's voice remained controlled, but steel ran underneath. So she ran, and she hid, and she raised my children in poverty for 3 years rather than risk bringing them into our family. Victoria's expression hardened. If she couldn't handle the reality of who you are, she had no business being involved with you in the first place. She was 23 years old and in love with someone she thought was better than he actually was. Adrian set down his glass. And she wasn't wrong to run, was she? Look at what I've become. Look at the enemies, the violence, the constant danger. She saw all that and chose to protect her children from it. They're your heirs. They're children. 2-year-old children who don't know I exist, who've never had a father, who've been living in poverty while we sit in brownstones and count our money. The emotion broke through despite Adrian's best efforts. She works 2 jobs, Mother. The mother of my children works night shifts as a nurse and is 3 months behind on rent because she chose raising them safe over raising them in our world. Victoria absorbed this, her calculating mind already working through implications. What do you want to do? I want to be their father. That's complicated. Everything about this is complicated. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. But they exist. They're mine. And I can't just pretend I don't know. I can't walk away from them. And Elena? Wants nothing to do with me. Thinks I'll corrupt them, turn them into monsters, drag them into danger. She's probably right. But you're going to pursue this anyway. It wasn't a question. Victoria knew her son too well. I have to. Adrian met his mother's eyes. You wanted heirs, wanted the family line to continue. Well, congratulations. You have grandchildren. They're just being raised by a woman you drove away because she wasn't good enough for your standards. The barb hit home. Victoria flinched, an expression of regret flickering across her features before the iron mask returned. What can I do? The question surprised him. Nothing. This is my responsibility to handle. Adrian. Victoria rose, crossing to stand before her son. I made mistakes. I was protecting you, protecting the family, but I made mistakes. If there are children, my grandchildren, living in poverty because of choices I influenced, then I need to make that right. You can't buy your way into their lives. I'm not trying to. But you'll need help navigating this situation. Elena isn't going to simply accept your presence in their lives. You'll need to prove you can be what they need, not just what you are. Adrian studied his mother, seeing genuine concern beneath the calculating exterior. She won't trust anything I offer. She'll see it as manipulation. Then don't offer it as manipulation. Offer it as responsibility. Victoria's voice turned practical. Child support is legally required once paternity is established. Medical care, education, basic necessities. Frame it as legal obligation, not generosity. She'll refuse. Then you file for shared custody and let courts mandate it. Victoria softened slightly. Or you find a way to convince her that you're not the monster she believes you to be. That you can be a father without being a crime lord. That those children can know their heritage without being consumed by it. Adrian laughed bitterly. And how exactly do I do that? By actually being better. Victoria placed a hand on his shoulder. By proving that power doesn't require cruelty, that strength can coexist with gentleness, that you're capable of putting someone else's needs above your own interests. By being the man you were when you were with her, instead of the man you became after she left. I can't be that person anymore. Why not? The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Why couldn't he? What fundamental law of nature prevented Adrian Cross from being something other than the feared crime lord he'd cultivated? Only his own choices. Only his own decisions about what survival required and what power demanded. I don't know how, he admitted quietly. Victoria smiled sadly. Then you learn. Because if you want those children in your life, if you want to be their father rather than just the stranger who shares their DNA, you'll have to become someone worthy of that title. And Adrian, darling, right now, you're not. The truth of it settled over him like a weight. He wasn't worthy of being Alicia and Marcus's father. Wasn't worthy of Elena's trust. Wasn't worthy of the innocence in those emerald eyes, or the hope that he could be better than everything he'd proven himself to be. But maybe, just maybe, he could become worthy. It would require changing everything about how he operated, how he made decisions, how he balanced the empire against the family. Would require showing vulnerability he'd spent years burying, exercising restraint that went against every instinct, prioritizing people over power. Would require becoming someone fundamentally different, while somehow maintaining control of an empire that demanded he remain exactly who he was. Impossible. Except the alternative was walking away from his children, and that wasn't an option he could accept. I need to go, Adrian said abruptly. I need to think. Victoria nodded. Call if you need help. And Adrian, whatever mistakes I made before, I won't compound them now. Those children are my grandchildren. When you're ready to introduce us, I'll be ready to meet them properly. He left without responding, his mind too full of conflicting thoughts and impossible decisions. The car waited, Marcus looking up from his phone with practiced alertness. Home, sir? No. Adrian made a decision. Queens, I want to see where they live. Sir, you said no surveillance. I'm not surveilling, I'm observing. There's a difference. Not much of one, his conscience whispered, but Adrian ignored it. The drive took 40 minutes through mid-morning traffic. They ended up in a neighborhood that made Adrian's security detail visibly tense. Older buildings, questionable infrastructure, the kind of area where crime statistics were high and police response times were slow. This was where Elena had chosen to raise his children rather than risk his world. The building looked tired, paint peeling, front steps cracked, the kind of place where residents worked hard and prayed harder and survived on hope and determination. Park here, Adrian instructed, pointing to a spot half a block down with clear sight lines. Sir, I just want to see. I won't approach. I won't make contact. I just need to see. They waited 20 minutes before Elena appeared, the twins walking beside her now, holding her hands. She looked exhausted, carrying grocery bags that probably represented careful budgeting and discount shopping. Alicia skipped despite obvious tiredness. Marcus chattered, pointing at things only he could see. Elena smiled at them both, her face transformed by love into something beautiful, despite the exhaustion and stress. Adrian watched them climb those broken steps, disappear into that building that probably had heat, that barely worked, and plumbing that constantly failed. Watched the family he'd never known existed navigate a life he'd never had to imagine. His children lived here. In this neighborhood, in this building, in circumstances he could change with a single phone call. But Elena had chosen this over him. That truth cut deeper than anything else. Let's go, Adrian said quietly. The car pulled away, leaving behind the building where his children slept, ate, played, existed without him. Adrian stared out the window, his mind working through strategies and options and approaches. He could force the issue, could use courts and lawyers and his considerable resources to establish rights and demand access, could wage a legal battle that Elena couldn't afford to fight and win through sheer financial advantage, could prove every fear she'd ever had absolutely justified. Or he could do something he'd never done before in any negotiation, any power play, any situation where he wanted something. He could wait, could be patient, could prove through restraint and respect that he deserved what she'd refused to give freely, could try to become the man who deserved to be Alicia and Marcus's father instead of just demanding the title by blood right. It went against every instinct he'd developed, against every lesson he'd learned about power and control, against the fundamental operating principle that had kept him alive and successful for 20 years. But maybe that was exactly the point. Maybe being a father required unlearning everything that made him effective as a crime lord. Maybe the two roles were fundamentally incompatible. Maybe Elena was right, and he had to choose. Adrian pulled out his phone, staring at the number she'd given him. Tomorrow, she'd said. They'd talk tomorrow about logistics and support, and futures that seemed impossible to reconcile. Tomorrow, he'd have to start figuring out how to be someone he'd never been. Tomorrow, everything would change. For tonight, he sat in the back of his car, thinking about emerald eyes and matching dimples, and two small voices asking every day why they didn't have a daddy like the other kids. They had a daddy. They just had one who didn't know how to be what they needed. But Adrian Cross had built an empire from nothing, had survived challenges that destroyed other men, had accomplished impossible things through sheer will and strategic thinking. Surely he could learn to be a father. Surely he could become worthy of the title those children deserved to give him. Surely somehow he could find a way to have both, the empire and the family, the power and the peace, the fear that protected and the love that transformed. Or he'd lose everything trying. Either way, there was no going back. The moment he'd seen those twins, the moment he'd recognized his own features reflected in their faces, the moment Elena had confirmed the truth, everything had changed irrevocably. Adrian Cross was a father. Now he just had to figure out what that meant. The call came at 7 the next morning, exactly when Adrian had promised. Elena stared at the unknown number flashing on her burner phone screen, her coffee growing cold in her hands while Alessia and Marcus demolished their cereal at the small kitchen table behind her. She'd barely slept. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every shadow passing beneath the streetlight outside had sent her pulse racing with the certainty that Adrian had changed his mind about giving her space, that his people were coming, that the fragile autonomy she'd fought so hard to maintain was about to be ripped away. The phone continued ringing. "Mama, you gonna answer that?" Marcus asked through a mouthful of Cheerios. Elena took a breath and accepted the call. "Hello?" "It's Adrian." His voice sounded different over the phone, quieter, less commanding, almost uncertain. "Is this a good time?" She glanced at the twins, both absorbed in their breakfast and the cartoon playing on the ancient television she'd rescued from a curb 3 months ago. "I have 20 minutes before I need to get them to daycare. Then I'll be brief. I want to meet, properly. Somewhere neutral where we can talk without scaring the children or causing a scene." "Adrian, please." The word came easier this time, like he'd been practicing. "I'm not going to ambush you or make demands. I just need to understand." 3 years, Elena. You owe me at least an explanation.
The guilt that had been her constant companion since yesterday intensified. He was right. Whatever her reasons, whatever her fears, he deserved to know why she'd made the choices she had. "There's a coffee shop on Roosevelt Avenue," she said slowly. "The one near the subway station. Do you know it?" "I'll find it. 9 o'clock. After I drop them off. I'll be there." A pause. "Thank you." The line went dead.
Elena set down the phone with shaking hands, already second-guessing the decision. Meeting Adrian meant opening a door she'd spent 3 years keeping locked. Meant confronting the past she'd tried so hard to outrun. Meant risking everything she'd built in her careful exile. But he'd found them. The choice of whether to engage was no longer hers. "Mama sad?" Alessia's small voice cut through her thoughts. Elena forced a smile, crossing to wipe milk from her daughter's chin. "Mama's fine, baby. Just thinking about grown-up stuff." "The man from the park?" The observation hit Elena like a physical blow. She'd hoped the twins were too young to remember, too absorbed in their play to notice. But Alicia had always been perceptive, reading emotions and undercurrents with unsettling accuracy. "Yes," Elena admitted. "The man from the park. He looked like Marcus," Alessia said matter-of-factly. "Same eyes." Elena's throat tightened. "You noticed that?" Huh? "Is he our daddy?" The question hung in the small kitchen, impossible to avoid. Elena had prepared for this conversation abstractly, knowing it would come eventually. She'd just never imagined it happening while her children ate breakfast, and she tried to keep her world from imploding. "Yes," she whispered. "He's your daddy." Marcus's head snapped up, cereal forgotten. "Really? We have a daddy?" "You've always had a daddy, sweetheart. He didn't know about you until yesterday." "Why not?" Marcus's face scrunched in confusion. "Doesn't everybody know about their kids? How did you explain to a 2-year-old that you'd run away because you were terrified? That you'd chosen poverty over the chance your children might grow up to be monsters? That sometimes love meant protection, and protection meant distance?" "It's complicated," Elena said, the inadequate words all she could offer. "But now he knows, and he wants to meet you properly." "When?" Alessia's eyes lit up with excitement that broke Elena's heart. "Soon, baby. But Mama needs to talk to him first, okay? Grown-up talk." "About us?" "About lots of things." Elena gathered their dishes, needing movement to process the surreal turn her morning had taken. "Now come on, we need to get you two ready for daycare." The next hour passed in the familiar chaos of getting toddlers dressed, teeth brushed, bags packed. Normal routines that felt anything but normal under the weight of what was coming. Elena walked them to the subsidized daycare 3 blocks away, hyper-aware of every car that passed, every person who glanced their direction, half expecting Adrian's security detail to materialize from the shadows. Nothing happened. The drop-off proceeded normally. She kissed both twins goodbye, watched them run inside to join their friends, and stood on the sidewalk fighting the urge to grab them and run. Running was what had created this mess. Running had bought her 3 years but solved nothing. Maybe it was time to stand still. The coffee shop sat in a perpetually busy intersection, the kind of place that saw a constant stream of commuters and neighborhood regulars. Elena arrived early, claiming a corner booth with clear sight lines to both entrances. Old habits from her time with Adrian, when she'd learned that situational awareness wasn't paranoia, it was survival. She ordered black coffee she couldn't afford and didn't want, just for something to hold while she waited. Adrian arrived precisely at 9, and Elena's breath caught despite 3 years and every defense she'd built. He looked different in daylight without the shock of discovery between them. Older. Harder. The kind of dangerous that made other patrons instinctively shift away as he crossed the room. He'd dressed down. Jeans and a simple black sweater instead of the tailored suits she remembered, but nothing could disguise what he was. Power radiated from him like heat, turning heads and inspiring caution even in this mundane setting. He slid into the booth across from her, his movements controlled and precise. "Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd come alone. My security is outside, far enough to give us privacy, close enough to respond if needed." Adrian's mouth twisted. "I can't turn off being who I am, Elena, but I can give you space within those constraints." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." The word came out raw,
Start with why. Why you ran. Why you didn't tell me. Why you chose this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing the worn booth, her tired face, the whole precarious existence she'd built, overcoming to me. Elena took a breath, gathering thoughts she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head, but never spoken aloud. The night I left, I came to your office. Do you remember? Adrian's brow furrowed. You never came to my office. I did. You were in a meeting, so I waited in the hallway, and I heard your mother. The memory still had the power to make her stomach clench. She was talking to you about me, about how I was a distraction you couldn't afford, how I was making you soft, making you vulnerable, how the Petrova family was circling because they sensed weakness, and that weakness was me. Understanding flickered across Adrian's features. Elena, she wasn't wrong. Elena continued before she could lose her nerve. I was making you vulnerable. I saw it every time you were with me. You smiled more, let your guard down. Trusted people you should have been watching. Your enemies noticed. And I heard her tell you that you needed to handle the situation before it became terminal. That's not what she meant. Wasn't it? Elena met his eyes. Be honest, Adrian. What were you planning to do about me? We'd been together 4 months, long enough for people to notice, long enough for your mother to worry, long enough for me to start imagining futures that were never going to happen. What was your endgame? The silence stretched long enough to be its own answer. I didn't have one, Adrian admitted quietly. I was compartmentalizing. You were separate from everything else. A space where I could be something other than what the family required. I was an escape fantasy. You were real, the only real thing in my life. But not real enough to actually integrate into your world. Elena's voice stayed steady despite the pain. Not real enough to defend when your mother questioned my place. Not real enough to choose over the empire. Adrian's jaw clenched. That's not fair. Life's not fair. I learned that listening to your mother explain all the ways I didn't measure up. Elena leaned forward. She talked about bloodlines and alliances and strategic marriages like I was something you'd scraped off your shoe. And you know what the worst part was? She was right. I was a waitress from Queens with community college credits and dreams that didn't extend past maybe managing my own diner someday. I had no business being with you. I never cared about any of that. You cared about your family's approval. You cared about building your reputation. You cared about proving yourself worthy of leading the empire. Elena's voice cracked. And I cared about you enough to know that I was standing in the way of everything you actually wanted. So you ran. So I left. Before you had to make the choice. Before your mother forced your hand. Before I became the liability that got you killed. Elena swiped at tears she hadn't meant to shed. I packed a bag that night and took a bus to Newark. Found a cash-under-the-table cleaning job in a room in a boarding house. Changed my name. Disappeared. Adrian absorbed this, something that looked like grief crossing his features. And the pregnancy? 3 weeks later. I was late and nauseous and exhausted, and I took a test in a gas station bathroom. The memory still felt surreal. 2 lines, positive. And I sat on that disgusting floor and cried because I was alone and terrified and so completely unprepared for what that meant. You could have told me. Could I? Elena challenged. Really think about that, Adrian. You're building an empire, consolidating power, fighting off rivals and proving yourself to your family. And suddenly the girl you were planning to let go of gently shows up pregnant. What would you have done? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The honest answer too complicated for simple words. You would have done the right thing, Elena continued. Because underneath everything, you're not cruel. You would have set me up somewhere safe, provided financially, made sure the child was cared for, but you would have resented the obligation, the complication, the way it tied you to a past you were trying to move beyond. You don't know that, don't I? You just admitted you were compartmentalizing our relationship, that I was separate from your real life. A pregnancy destroys that separation, Adrian. It makes things permanent and messy and impossible to contain. Elena's voice dropped. And your mother would have made sure I understood exactly how unwelcome that complication was. Adrian's expression darkened. My mother doesn't make those decisions. Your mother has been making those decisions for 40 years. She's the real power in your family, and we both know it. Elena held his gaze. She would have seen my pregnancy as a trap, an attempt to leverage my way into the family through blood ties, and she would have made my life hell while smiling and writing checks. The truth of it hung between them, undeniable and ugly. So I stayed hidden, Elena said, found a different doctor who took cash payments,
Worked until I couldn't hide the pregnancy anymore, then survived on savings until the twins came. No epidural because I couldn't afford the hospital. A midwife in my efficiency apartment who barely spoke English. 22 hours of labor that I thought might kill me. Adrian's face had gone pale. Elena. They were so small. Alessia was 4 pounds, Marcus barely 5. The midwife said they needed NICU care, but that meant hospitals and records and questions I couldn't answer. So I kept them in my apartment for 3 weeks, barely sleeping, terrified every time they cried that something was wrong. The memories poured out now, 3 years of silence breaking. Alicia stopped breathing once. Just stopped. And I did CPR on my daughter while Marcus screamed in his bassinet, and I promised myself that if she lived, I would never put them in danger again. They were in danger because of me. Understanding dawned across Adrian's features. You were alone and scared and nearly lost them because you were afraid of what my world would do to them. I was afraid of what your world would make them become. Elena wiped her eyes. I've seen the men in your organization, Adrian. I've seen what that life does to people. The violence they accept as normal, the way they look at other humans as either assets or obstacles. I didn't want that for my children. Our children. Yes, our children, who I've raised alone for 3 years because I was terrified that bringing you into their lives meant destroying any chance they had at being good people. Adrian sat back, processing. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Tell me about them. About Alessia and Marcus. What are they like? The shift in subject caught Elena off guard. She'd been braced for arguments, demands, and anger at being excluded, not genuine curiosity about the children themselves. Alessia is fierce, she said slowly. Fearless in a way that terrifies me. She climbs everything, questions everything, protects her brother like a lioness. She's got your stubbornness and your instinct for reading people. A ghost of a smile touched Adrian's lips. And Marcus? Gentle, thoughtful. He notices things other people miss, colors and sounds and the way light moves through windows. Elena's voice softened. He brings me flowers he finds growing through sidewalk cracks. Tells elaborate stories about where they came from, these whole fantasy worlds in his head. Do they look like me? Beyond the obvious features? Alessia has your walk, this confident stride like she owns every room she enters, and Marcus gets this expression when he's concentrating, this little furrow between his eyebrows that's exactly yours. Elena paused. They ask about you constantly. Every time they see other kids with their fathers. Every Father's Day at daycare, when they have to make cards for someone who doesn't exist. Every birthday, when I have to explain why only Mama is celebrating with them. Adrian's composure cracked. What do you tell them? That their daddy loves them very much but can't be with us right now. That it's complicated and not their fault. That someday they'll understand. Elena's voice broke. I lie to them every single day because the truth, that I kept them from you because I was scared, makes me the villain. You're not the villain. You're the one who's been protecting them. From you, from their own father. Elena met his eyes. How is that not villainous? Because you were right. The admission seemed to cost Adrian something. Everything you feared about my world, about what they might become, about the danger they'd face, you were right. I am dangerous. My life is violence and strategy and constant threat. Your instinct to keep them away from that was sound. Then why are we having this conversation? If I was right, if your world is everything I feared, why not just walk away? Let them grow up safe and ignorant. Adrian leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. Because they're mine. Because every instinct I have that makes me dangerous in business also makes me incapable of abandoning my own children. Because 3 years ago, I might have let you go to protect what we had. But now? He shook his head. Now I know they exist, and walking away isn't an option I can accept. Even if staying in their lives puts them at risk, I'll eliminate the risk. Elena laughed bitterly. You can't eliminate what you are, Adrian. The risk is inherent. It's in your DNA.
Your choices, your empire. You can't protect them from yourself. Then I'll change. The words came out fierce, definitive. I'll become someone who can be their father without destroying them, someone worthy of the title. People don't change. Not fundamentally. People change when they have sufficient motivation. Adrian's gaze locked with hers. And I've never been more motivated than I am right now. Those children deserve a father, not a stranger who sends money, not a distant figure who exists only in explanations and excuses.
An actual father who knows their favorite foods and reads them bedtime stories and shows up to their school events. You don't know the first thing about being a father. No, but I know how to learn, how to adapt, how to become whatever a situation requires. Adrian's voice gentled. I built an empire from nothing, Elena. Surely I can learn to be a decent parent. Parenting isn't a hostile takeover. You can't strategize your way into their hearts. I know that, but I can show up. Consistently, patiently. I can prove through actions rather than words that I'm trustworthy, that I can be gentle, that I'm capable of putting their needs above my own interests. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to think that the man sitting across from her could transform into someone safe, someone good, someone worthy of Alicia and Marcus's love and trust. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting didn't make things true. What are you proposing? She asked carefully. Supervised visits. Here, in public places, wherever you're comfortable. Let me spend time with them while you're present. Let them get to know me gradually. No pressure, no demands, just presence. And if they don't like you, if they're scared of you, pain flashed across Adrian's features. Then I'll work harder to earn their trust. But Elena, I saw how they looked at me yesterday. Curious, not frightened. They don't know enough to be afraid yet. That's exactly what worries me. They're too young to understand danger. Which is why you'll be there. Every interaction, every visit, you're the final authority. The moment you think I'm crossing a line or they're uncomfortable, we stop. Adrian paused. I'm not trying to take them from you. I'm asking to be included in their lives. Elena studied him, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda. All she found was exhaustion and genuine pleading that looked foreign on Adrian Cross's face. 1 hour, she said finally. This Saturday. The children's section of the public library. You can read to them, play with them, whatever. But I'm there the entire time, and when I say it's over, it's over. Relief flooded Adrian's expression. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They're 2-year-olds. They're unpredictable and honest, and if you're not what they need, they'll let you know immediately. I can handle honest. Can you? Elena challenged. Oh, can you handle Alicia asking why you weren't there when she was born? Can you handle Marcus wanting to know why all his friends have daddies who live with them? Can you handle the questions you won't have good answers for? I'll find answers, or I'll admit I don't have them, but I won't lie to them, and I won't make promises I can't keep. Elena nodded slowly, feeling the first crack in the walls she'd built. There are conditions. Name them. No gifts. No expensive toys or clothes or anything that makes this about money. If you want their affection, earn it through presence, not presents. Agreed. No business talk, no phone calls about territory or deals or whatever empire management requires. When you're with them, you're just Adrian, not the crime lord, not the feared leader, just a man spending time with his children. Agreed. And Adrian? Elena's voice hardened. If I ever see you put them in danger, if your world touches them in any way that threatens their safety, I will disappear so completely you'll never find us again. Resources or not, I'll become a ghost. Understood. Adrian met her eyes. But I swear to you, Elena, I will burn my entire empire to the ground before I let anything happen to them. They are the line. The absolute non-negotiable line that nothing and no one crosses. The conviction in his voice sent shivers down her spine. She'd seen Adrian make threats before, deliver promises of violence with cold certainty. But this was different. This was primal, visceral, the kind of protective fury that recognized no limits or consequences. This was a father defending his children before he'd even truly met them. Saturday, Elena repeated. 10 in the morning, children's section. Don't be late. I'll be early. Adrian stood, then hesitated. Elena, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry that my world was so frightening you felt you had to run. Sorry that my mother made you feel worthless. Sorry that you've been doing this alone when you should have had support. I can't change the past 3 years, but I can try to do better going forward. The apology landed like a stone in still water, spreading ripples Elena wasn't prepared to process. Just don't hurt them, she whispered. That's all I ask. Don't hurt my babies. Our babies. And I won't. I promise you, Elena, I won't. He left before she could respond, moving through the coffee shop with that predatory grace that marked him as dangerous even in the most mundane settings. Elena watched him go, her coffee long cold, her heart hammering with hope and terror in equal measure. She'd just agreed to let Adrian cross into her children's lives. Either it would be the best decision she'd ever made, or the worst. Only time would tell which. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn sunshine that made Central Park postcard perfect, but Elena had chosen the Queen's Public Library instead, neutral ground far from Adrian's usual territory. She arrived 30 minutes early with the twins, using the extra time to prepare them for what was coming. Remember what Mama told you? Elena knelt before Alessia and Marcus in the children's section, surrounded by colorful murals and miniature furniture. The man from the park is coming to visit. He's your daddy, and he wants to spend time with you. Our real daddy? Marcus's eyes went wide with the same excitement he showed when she let him pick extra books at story time. Yes, baby, your real daddy. Will he live with us now? Alicia asked, her practical mind already working through logistics. Elena's heart clenched. No, sweetheart, he has his own home, but he'll visit sometimes if you want him to. I want him to! Marcus bounced with enthusiasm. Tommy's daddy takes him to the park and pushes him really high on the swings. Will our daddy do that? Maybe. You'll have to ask him. Elena smoothed his hair, fighting back tears. Her son was so ready to love, so eager for the father-shaped hole in his life to be filled. The trust terrified her. What if he's mean? Alessia's question carried the wariness Elena recognized from herself. Then you tell Mama, and we leave. But I don't think he'll be mean. I think he's going to try very hard to make you happy. Because he loves us? Marcus asked. Did Adrian love them? Could you love people you just discovered existed? Or was this about possession, obligation, the biological imperative to claim what was his? Because you're his children, Elena answered carefully, and that's important to him. Adrian arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, and Elena's breath caught at the sight of him. He dressed even more casually than at the coffee shop. Jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, sneakers that had actually seen wear. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd run his hands through it multiple times. He looked nervous. Adrian Cross, who'd stared down rival bosses and survived assassination attempts, looked genuinely nervous about meeting his 2-year-old children. Hi, he said softly, approaching their corner. His eyes went immediately to the twins, drinking in details with an intensity that made Elena's chest tight. Say hello, Elena prompted gently. Hello, Alessia and Marcus chorused, both suddenly shy in the face of this stranger who was supposed to be important. Adrian crouched down to their level, maintaining careful distance. Hi, Alessia. Hi, Marcus. I'm Adrian, your dad. The word came out uncertain, like he was testing how it felt. Thank you for letting me visit today. You're really tall, Marcus observed. A genuine smile crossed Adrian's face. I am. You might be tall too when you grow up. Do you like being here, at the library? Mama brings us every week, Alessia answered, warming slightly. We get 3 books each, and there's story time with Miss Jennifer. What kind of books do you like? Dinosaurs, Marcus exclaimed, his shyness evaporating. I like the one with the T-Rex who makes friends with the Triceratops, even though they're supposed to be enemies. Adrian's expression shifted to something that looked like wonder. That sounds like a good story. Could you show me? Marcus grabbed his hand without hesitation, tugging Adrian toward the picture book section. Elena's heart stuttered at the sight of her son's small fingers wrapped around Adrian's much larger ones. The trust so freely given it made her want to weep. Alessia hung back, studying Adrian with the careful assessment that was so characteristic. Are you really our daddy? I really am. Why weren't you here before? The question landed like a blow. Adrian glanced at Elena, who nodded slightly. He'd promised honesty, and Alessia deserved truth. I didn't know about you, Adrian said gently. Your mama and I lived in different places, and she didn't know how to tell me you existed. But the moment I found out, I wanted to meet you. I wanted to be here. Do you have a house?
I do. It's in a different part of the city. Is it big? Pretty big. Too big for just me, actually. Alessia processed this. We live in a small apartment. Mama says it's cozy, but sometimes I wish I had my own room instead of sharing with Marcus. The casual mention of their cramped living situation made Adrian's jaw tighten, but he kept his voice even. Sharing a room with a brother sounds fun sometimes, though, right? Sometimes.
But he snores and talks in his sleep about dinosaurs. Alessia's nose wrinkled. Last night he woke me up yelling about a brontosaurus eating all the cookies. Adrian laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. That does sound disruptive. What do you dream about? Flying, and being a superhero who saves people. Alessia tilted her head. What do you dream about? The question seemed to catch Adrian off guard. Elena watched him struggle with how to answer a child who expected honesty but couldn't handle the darkness of his actual dreams, violence and betrayal, and the faces of people he'd destroyed. Lately, I dream about meeting you and your brother, Adrian said finally. About getting to know you. Alicia seemed satisfied with this. Okay, you can come see Marcus's dinosaur book, but if you're boring, I'm going to play with the puzzles instead. That's fair, Adrian agreed solemnly. They spent the next hour in a bubble of normalcy that felt surreal to Elena. Adrian sat cross-legged on the carpet while Marcus showed him every dinosaur book in the section, providing elaborate commentary on which ones were accurate and which ones got the teeth wrong. Alessia eventually joined them, bringing a stack of books about brave girls doing impossible things. Adrian read to them with surprising skill, doing voices for different characters that made both twins giggle. He listened with genuine attention when Marcus explained his theory about why T-Rexes were actually misunderstood. He admired the puzzle Alicia completed with swift efficiency, asking questions that showed he was actually interested in her process. He was good at this. The realization unsettled Elena. She'd expected awkwardness, discomfort, the obvious struggling of a man completely out of his element. Instead, Adrian approached fatherhood the way he probably approached everything else, with focus, intelligence, and an ability to read his audience. Mama, can Daddy come to the park after? Marcus asked, using the title without hesitation. Elena's eyes met Adrian's over the children's heads. They'd agreed on an hour, but the twins were happy, engaged, showing no signs of fear or discomfort. If he wants to, she said carefully. I'd like that very much, Adrian answered. They walked to a nearby playground, the twins chattering between them while Elena and Adrian maintained careful distance. His security detail was invisible, but Elena knew they were there, watching from vehicles in strategic positions, ensuring their boss's safety even during something as mundane as a playground visit. The reminder of what Adrian was, what he represented, sent ice through Elena's veins. This moment of normalcy was an illusion, a bubble that could pop at any moment when reality intruded. Marcus ran immediately to the swings. Push me! Push me really high like Tommy's daddy does! Adrian looked to Elena for permission. She nodded, her throat tight with emotion as she watched him position himself behind Marcus's swing, giving careful pushes that sent her son higher with each arc. Higher! Marcus shrieked with joy. I'm flying! Not too high, Elena called out, maternal instinct overriding everything. I've got him, Adrian assured her, and something in his voice made her believe it. Alessia conquered the climbing structure with her characteristic fearlessness, Adrian hovering nearby but giving her space to navigate independently. When she reached the top, she looked down at him with triumph. I did it myself. You absolutely did. That was impressive. Mama says I climb like a monkey. A very brave monkey, Adrian agreed. They played for another hour, time slipping away in laughter and the simple joy of children experiencing the world. Elena sat on a bench, watching her family because that's what they looked like from a distance, a family, and trying to reconcile the image with reality. Adrian pushed Marcus on the swings. Adrian helped Alessia navigate the monkey bars. Adrian settled a dispute between the twins about whose turn it was on the slide with diplomatic skill that probably served him well in boardrooms and territorial negotiations. He looked happy. The realization hit Elena with unexpected force, not powerful, not feared, not calculating, just happy. Like this moment was enough. Like being here with these children was all that mattered. Her phone rang, shattering the moment. Elena glanced at the screen and frowned at the unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her accept the call. Elena Moore? The voice was male, unfamiliar, with an accent she couldn't place. Who is this? A concerned friend. You should know that Adrian Cross isn't being honest with you about his situation. His enemies are closer than he's admitting. And those children? They make him vulnerable in ways he hasn't begun to understand. Elena's blood ran cold. How did you get this number? The same way we found out about the twins. Nothing stays hidden forever, Miss Moore. Not even children he tried to keep secret. A pause. Tell Adrian that Victor Petrov sends his regards, and his congratulations on the family he's been hiding. The line went dead. Elena's hand shook as she lowered the phone. Victor Petrov. The name rang bells from 3 years ago, conversations she'd overheard, warnings Adrian's people had whispered. The Petrov family had been rivals, dangerous ones, the kind that didn't forgive slights or forget territory disputes. Elena? You okay? Adrian was suddenly there, his attention split between her pale face and the twins playing nearby. Someone called. Her voice came out strangled. Victor Petrov. He knows about Alessia and Marcus. Every ounce of color drained from Adrian's face. What exactly did he say? Elena repeated the conversation, watching Adrian transform before her eyes. The gentle father disappeared, replaced by the crime lord she'd feared. His expression went cold, calculating, deadly. Marcus, he called to his head of security, who materialized instantly. Full perimeter, now, eyes on the children. What's happening? Elena demanded, fear clawing up her throat. Victor Petrov has been trying to move into my territory for 6 months. He's ruthless, connected, and smart enough to know that direct confrontation won't work. Adrian's voice was clipped, controlled. But if he knows about the twins, he'll use them against you. He'll try. Elena's worst nightmare was crystallizing in real time. This was why she'd run. This was why she'd hidden. This was the inevitable result of letting Adrian into their lives. We need to leave, she said, already moving toward the twins. We need to disappear, right now. Adrian caught her arm, his grip gentle but firm. Running won't solve this. If Petrov knows about them, he knows where you live, where they go to daycare, your routines. Running just puts you on the road without protection. I've survived 3 years without your protection. You survived 3 years invisible. That invisibility is gone. Adrian's eyes bore into hers. The moment I found you in that park, the moment anyone saw me with the twins, their existence became known. You can hate me for that, but it doesn't change the reality. They need protection now, and I'm the only one who can provide it. Protection? You're what put them in danger. I know. The admission came raw, tortured. I know this is my fault, my world, my enemies. But Elena, please, let me fix this. Let me keep them safe. How? By what? Surrounding them with armed guards? Teaching them to live in fear? Turning them into prisoners of your empire? Adrian's jaw clenched. By eliminating the threat, permanently. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena knew what elimination meant in Adrian's world. She'd heard the whispered stories, seen the news reports about rivals who disappeared, evidence that vanished, cases that went unsolved. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about protection. Adrian's voice was absolute. Victor Petrov threatened my children. There is no scenario in which he walks away from that. The only question is how quickly and completely I dismantle everything he's built. Adrian, no. The word came out with command that made her flinch. This isn't negotiable. I promised to keep them safe. I promised nothing in my world would touch them. Petrov just crossed that line, and I will burn his entire organization to the ground before I let him use my children as leverage. Elena looked at the twins, still playing on the structure, oblivious to the danger circling. Marcus was making explosion sounds while Alessia narrated an elaborate story about rescuing dinosaurs. They were babies. Her babies. And someone had just painted targets on their backs. What do we do? The question came out broken. Adrian's expression softened marginally. First, we get you somewhere safe. My people will take you to a secure location. I'm not going anywhere with your people. Elena, no. You don't get to just take control because you're scared. These are my children too, and I won't let you drag them deeper into your world because one of your enemies made a phone call. That phone call was a threat, a direct threat against our children's lives. Adrian's control was fracturing. I understand you're frightened. I understand you don't trust me or my world. But right now, in this moment, your options are limited.
Either you accept my protection voluntarily, or Petrov makes his move and we all suffer the consequences. You're asking me to choose between different types of danger, your protection or his threat. I'm asking you to choose the option where your children survive. Adrian's voice dropped. Please, Elena. I know I've given you no reason to trust me. I know my world is exactly what you feared. But I swear on everything I am, I will keep them safe. Whatever it costs. Whatever I have to sacrifice. They are the line, and Petrov just crossed it. Elena looked between Adrian and the twins, her mind racing through impossible options. Run and risk Petrov finding them without protection. Stay and let Adrian pull them into the violence she'd spent 3 years avoiding. Trust the man she'd fled, or face the monster who'd just threatened her children. No good choices, only different shades of terrible. 24 hours, she said finally. We go somewhere safe for 24 hours while you handle this situation. But Adrian, if you solve this problem through violence, if you prove that your world is exactly the nightmare I feared, you'll never trust me again. I know. Adrian pulled out his phone, already making calls. Marcus, prep the safe house in Westchester. Full security team. Stock it for a woman and 2 toddlers. Food, clothes, toys, whatever they need. I want it ready in 30 minutes. We can't just leave, Elena protested. The twins' things, their routines, will be replicated as closely as possible. I'll have my people collect anything essential from your apartment. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. But we leave now. Every minute we stay exposed is a minute Petrov could use. Mama? Alessia had noticed the tension, her perceptive eyes moving between the adults. What's wrong? Elena forced a smile, crouching down to the twins' level. Nothing, baby. We're going to take a little trip with your daddy, a surprise adventure. An adventure? Marcus's face lit up. With dinosaurs? Maybe. We'll see what kind of adventure it turns out to be. Elena's voice cracked on the last words. They walked to where a black SUV waited, Adrian's security forming a protective diamond around them. Elena noticed for the first time how the other people in the park instinctively moved away, responding to signals they probably didn't consciously recognize. Danger. Power. Threat. This was what she'd fled. This was what she'd tried to protect her children from experiencing. And now she was walking straight into it because the alternative was worse. The safe house turned out to be a sprawling estate in Westchester County, all stone walls and security gates, and the kind of isolation that promised either safety or imprisonment depending on your perspective. Alessia and Marcus were enchanted by the sheer size of it, running through rooms while exclaiming over details that seemed magical to children who'd grown up in 400 square feet. There's a playroom, Marcus shouted from somewhere deep in the house, with 1,000,000 toys. I found a library, Alessia called back. A whole room just for books. Elena stood in the massive living room, feeling displaced and terrified. Adrian spoke quietly with his security chief near the entrance, their body language tense with the kind of planning that preceded violence. The twins will be safe here, Adrian said, approaching her after the consultation ended. Full security detail, surveillance on all approaches, safe room in the basement if needed. Nothing gets through. You're describing a fortress. For my 2-year-olds. I'm describing what's necessary to keep them alive. Adrian's voice was gentle despite the harsh words. I'm sorry it's come to this. Sorry my world followed us here. But I won't apologize for doing what needs to be done. What needs to be done being murder. What needs to be done being the elimination of a threat to my family. Adrian corrected. Petrov made his choice when he threatened them. This is simply consequences. Elena sank onto a leather couch, exhaustion and fear overwhelming her. I don't want them to know. Whatever you do, however you handle this, I don't want them to ever know their father is capable of that kind of violence. They won't. I promise you, Elena, whatever happens in the next 24 hours, they'll be shielded from it. They'll stay here with you, safe and oblivious, while I handle the ugliness. And then what? We just go back to our lives like nothing happened? Like you didn't destroy a man's entire organization to protect them? No. Then we figure out what comes next. Adrian crouched before her, his eyes intense. This changes things. You see that, right? The twins can't go back to that apartment in Queens. Can't walk to daycare unprotected. Can't live the invisible life you've been maintaining. Petrov knowing about them means others will know soon. The secret is out. The reality of it crashed over Elena like a wave. He was right.
The moment Adrian had found them, the moment Petrov had made that call, their careful anonymity had shattered. They couldn't unring that bell. So what, they just live here? In your fortress, surrounded by guards, prisoners of your empire? They live somewhere safe, with appropriate security, with the resources they deserve. Adrian's voice firmed. Elena, they're crosshairs now. That's not a role they can decline or ignore. It comes with protection, yes, but also with opportunities. Education, security, futures that don't involve poverty and struggle. I don't want your blood money. It's not blood money for them. It's inheritance, birthright, the resources owed to them by virtue of being my children. Adrian stood, pacing. I'm not trying to buy their love or your compliance. I'm trying to give them what they deserve, what they should have had from the beginning if you'd felt safe enough to tell me about them. The accusation stung because it held truth. If she'd trusted Adrian 3 years ago, if his world had been different, if his mother hadn't been so contemptuous, the twins would have grown up with advantages instead of struggling in poverty. But they also might have grown up as monsters. I need guarantees, Elena said finally. If I accept this, if I let you move us somewhere safer and provide security, I need guarantees that you won't try to control us, that you won't use your power to override my parenting decisions or turn them into copies of you. You have my word. Your word isn't enough. I need legal protection, formal agreements that specify my rights as their mother, your rights as their father, and the boundaries neither of us can cross. Adrian nodded slowly. I'll have my lawyers draft something, whatever makes you feel secure. But Elena, understand, this isn't about control. This is about protection, about ensuring that what happened today, that phone call from Petrov, never happens again because the threat no longer exists. You're really going to kill him. I'm really going to eliminate the threat he represents. However that needs to happen. Adrian's expression was absolute. I told you, they are the line, and anyone who crosses it pays the price. Petrov chose to cross it. These are simply consequences. Elena wanted to argue morality, wanted to find some middle ground between Adrian's black and white certainty and her own desperate hope that violence wasn't the only answer, but exhaustion and fear and the weight of impossible choices silenced her protests. 24 hours, she repeated. Handle this however you need to. Then we talk about what comes next. Agreed. Adrian pulled out his phone again. I need to go. The longer I wait, the more time Petrov has to make his move. Marcus will stay here with the full security team. You need anything at all, you tell them, and it happens. Adrian. Elena caught his arm as he turned to leave. Don't die. Whatever you're planning, whatever confrontation you're walking into, don't die. They just met you. They can't lose you already. Something vulnerable flashed across Adrian's face. I won't. I have too much to live for now. He left before she could respond, moving with the predatory grace that marked him as dangerous, even in expensive clothes. Elena watched through the window as his car disappeared down the long driveway, carrying him toward violence she could only imagine. Alessia appeared at her side, slipping a small hand into hers. Where did Daddy go? To handle some grown-up business, baby. Will he come back? The question held layers Alicia couldn't possibly understand. Would he come back? Or would Viktor Petrov prove stronger, smarter, more ruthless? Would Adrian's promise to protect them result in his own death, leaving Elena to explain to 2-year-olds that their father had died fighting to keep them safe? Yes, Elena said, making it a promise she had no power to keep. He'll come back. Good. Alicia squeezed her hand. I like him. He's nice and he does funny voices when he reads. Elena's throat tightened. He is nice, isn't he? Marcus thinks so too. He says we're lucky to have a daddy, finally. Lucky. Her son thought they were lucky to have discovered the father whose very existence had just painted targets on their backs. Lucky to have a connection to a world of violence and power and impossible moral compromises. Maybe they were. Maybe having Adrian's protection, his resources, his fierce devotion was worth the danger it brought. Or maybe Elena had just made the worst mistake of her life by staying instead of running. Only time would tell which. She gathered both twins close, holding them tight while outside the fortress walls. Their father went to war. The call came at 3 a.m. Elena jolted awake in the unfamiliar bedroom of the safe house, her heart hammering as she fumbled for the phone on the nightstand. The twins slept peacefully in the adjoining room, their breathing audible through the baby monitor Adrian's people had provided. "Hello?" Her voice came out hoarse with fear and interrupted sleep. "It's done." Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of a man who just crossed lines he could never uncross.
Petrov is no longer a threat. Elena's stomach churned. What does that mean exactly? It means his organization no longer exists. His financial infrastructure is dismantled. His political connections have been severed. His people have been absorbed into other families or retired permanently from the business. A pause. And Petrov himself is on a plane to Moscow with very clear instructions never to return to American soil. The specifics he wasn't saying screamed louder than his actual words. Elena could imagine what retired permanently meant, could picture the violence required to dismantle an entire criminal organization in less than 24 hours. "You didn't kill him." "I didn't have to. Death would have been easier, actually. But I remembered what you said about not wanting the twins to have a father capable of that kind of violence." Adrian's voice carried exhaustion that went bone deep. "So instead I destroyed everything he built, everyone he trusted, every resource he possessed. I gave him a choice. Leave the country and never return, or face consequences that would make death seem merciful. He chose exile." "That's not better, Adrian. That's just a different kind of cruelty." "That's strategic mercy." The steel returned to his tone. "He threatened my children. The fact that he's breathing at all is more restraint than I've shown an enemy in 20 years. Don't mistake pragmatism for kindness, Elena. I did what needed to be done to eliminate the threat while honoring your request. That's the best you're going to get." She wanted to argue morality, wanted to find fault with his logic, wanted to maintain the moral high ground she'd been clinging to. But exhaustion and relief and the simple fact that her children were safe made the arguments die in her throat. Are there others, other enemies who might come after them? Always, but none who will make Petrov's mistake now. Word is already spreading about what happens when someone threatens the cross heirs. I made an example that won't be forgotten. Adrian's voice softened marginally. "They're safe, Elena. As safe as anyone in my world can be, which means safer than most people, period." "When are you coming back?" "Few hours. I need to tie up some loose ends, make sure the message is clear. But I'll be there before the twins wake up. I promised Marcus I'd read him the dinosaur book again." The casual mention of their son, the easy way Adrian claimed connection and responsibility, sent conflicting emotions through Elena's chest. This was the man who'd just destroyed an organization through methods she didn't want to imagine. But he was also the man who'd done funny voices and pushed Marcus on the swings and promised to return for story time. "Elena?" Adrian's voice turned uncertain. "Are we okay? I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you're probably questioning every decision that led here. But I need to know. Are we going to be able to move forward from this?" Were they? Could she accept this new reality where Adrian was part of their lives, where his protection came with the price of knowing what he was capable of, where her children's safety was purchased with violence she'd never witness but always know existed? "I don't know," she admitted honestly, "but we're not running, not tonight anyway." "That's enough." Relief colored his words. "That's more than enough. Get some sleep, Elena. I'll handle everything else." The line went dead. Elena set down the phone and stared at the ceiling, her mind too full of thoughts to even consider sleep. Somewhere in the darkness outside this fortress, Adrian was completing whatever brutality he'd started, ensuring threats were eliminated, making examples, building walls of fear around his children that would keep them safe, but also define their entire existence. This was the life she'd tried to prevent. This was the exact scenario she'd fled to avoid. And yet here she was, accepting it because the alternative, leaving her children unprotected against enemies who now knew they existed, was unthinkable. Morning arrived with weak November sunshine. Elena found herself in the massive kitchen making breakfast from ingredients that hadn't been in the pantry yesterday. Adrian's people had stocked everything, anticipating needs before she'd articulated them. Coffee, exactly how she took it. The twins' favorite cereal, fresh fruit already washed and cut. It was thoughtful and invasive and deeply unsettling all at once. Alessia and Marcus tumbled into the kitchen still in their pajamas, eyes bright with the resilient energy of toddlers who'd slept peacefully despite the upheaval in their lives. "Is Daddy here yet?" Marcus asked immediately. "Not yet, baby. Soon,"
Can we play in the playroom again? There's a whole castle with knights and everything. After breakfast. They ate with the enthusiastic messiness of 2-year-olds, syrup somehow ending up in Alicia's hair, despite the pancakes being on a plate in front of her. Elena was cleaning them up when she heard the front door open, Adrian's voice speaking quietly with the security team. "Daddy!" Marcus scrambled down from his chair and ran toward the sound. Elena's heart clenched as she followed, finding Marcus wrapped around Adrian's legs while Alicia watched from the doorway with more reservation. Adrian looked exhausted. His clothes were different from yesterday, crisp and clean, no visible signs of whatever he'd done through the night. But his eyes carried shadows that spoke of sleepless hours and decisions that would haunt him. "Hey, buddy." Adrian crouched down to Marcus's level. "Did you sleep okay?" "Uh-huh. My bed is huge and there's night lights that look like stars." Marcus's enthusiasm was infectious. "Did you finish your grown-up business?" "I did. Everything's handled now." "Good. Now you can stay and play with us." Adrian glanced at Elena, seeking permission. She nodded slightly, and something that looked like relief crossed his features. "I'd love to play with you, but first, I need to talk to your mama about some important things. Can you and Alicia play in the other room for a bit?" "Okay, come on, Alicia. Let's build a fort." Alicia followed her brother but looked back at the adults with the perceptive wariness that was becoming characteristic. She knew something had shifted, even if she couldn't articulate what. Once the twins were occupied, Adrian turned to Elena. "We need to make some decisions about what comes next." "I know. The apartment in Queens isn't safe anymore. Too exposed, too vulnerable. I want to set you up somewhere secure. Nothing ostentatious, just a place with proper security where the twins can have their own rooms, and you're not constantly looking over your shoulder." "Adrian, before you argue, hear me out. This isn't about control or buying your compliance. This is practical necessity. Petrov is handled, but his exile doesn't mean all threats disappear. The twins are known now. They need protection, and that protection requires appropriate infrastructure." Elena crossed her arms, defensive despite knowing he was right. "Where?" "There's a building I own in Brooklyn. Good neighborhood, excellent schools nearby, doorman with security training. You'd have the penthouse. 3 bedrooms, office space, actual square footage. Security built into the building structure without being obvious. And I'm supposed to just accept this? Just let you relocate us into your property, under your control?" "You're supposed to accept reality," Adrian's voice firmed. "I'm not asking permission to keep you safe. I'm informing you of the parameters. But Elena, I am trying to do this collaboratively, trying to give you choices within necessary constraints. You can pick the neighborhood, the specific building, the layout. You can maintain your independence, your job, your life. I'm just ensuring the foundation is secure." "My job," Elena laughed bitterly. "Right, because I can totally keep working night shifts as a nurse while living in a penthouse surrounded by security." "Why not? If that work fulfills you, if it's important to you, there's no reason to stop. Though I'd argue you deserve better than night shifts given your qualifications." "You don't know anything about my qualifications. I know you were pre-med before financial circumstances forced you to drop out. I know you scored in the 98th percentile on your nursing entrance exams. I know you're overqualified for the position you have, but took it because it was the only thing flexible enough to work around single parenting." Adrian's gaze was steady. "I had my people compile information, not to invade your privacy, but to understand what you'd given up, what opportunities you'd sacrificed to keep the twins safe." The revelation that he'd been researching her life should have angered Elena. Instead, she felt exposed and oddly understood. "So what, you want to fund me going back to school? Turn me into some kind of Pygmalion project? I want to give you options. If you want to continue nursing, continue. If you want to finish your degree, I'll make that happen. If you want to do something completely different, that's fine too. This isn't about molding you into something you're not. It's about removing the barriers that forced you into choices you didn't want." Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "This is too much, too fast. Yesterday we were strangers. Now you're planning our entire future. Yesterday you were struggling alone. Today you have support whether you wanted it or not." Adrian sat across from her. "I'm not trying to overwhelm you. I'm trying to solve problems. It's what I do." "You can't solve everything with money and power." "No. But I can solve housing insecurity and financial stress and safety concerns. The rest, The emotional complexity, the trust, the actual relationship building. That takes time and effort and honest communication. I'm willing to put in that work if you are. Elena studied him, seeing exhaustion and sincerity and the fierce determination that probably made him effective in his world. What do you really want from this, Adrian? What's your end game? I want to be their father, not just financially or legally, but actually present in their lives. I want to know their favorite colors and read them bedtime stories and teach them to ride bikes. I want to be there for first days of school and skinned knees and every milestone I've already missed. His voice roughened. And I want them to know me as a father, not as the crime lord everyone fears. I want them to see whatever good still exists in me instead of just the monster I've become. That's a lot to ask. I know, but I'm willing to work for it, to prove through consistent action that I can be trusted with that role, to become worthy of the title they're already giving me.
And what about me? Where do I fit in this vision of family you're constructing? Adrian's expression shifted to something vulnerable. Wherever you want to fit. I'm not expecting romance or reconciliation or anything beyond co-parenting cooperation. If all we ever are is two people raising children together, that's enough. More than I deserve, actually. But you want more. What I want doesn't matter. What matters is what's best for Alicia and Marcus. And what's best is probably us finding a way to work together without the baggage of what we were or might have been. Elena appreciated his honesty, even as it highlighted how complicated everything had become. They weren't the same people they'd been 3 years ago. She'd been transformed by motherhood and survival, he by power and isolation. Any relationship they built now would have to account for those changes. The penthouse, she said slowly, I want to see it before agreeing to anything. And I want legal documentation of my rights as their mother, custody arrangements, financial parameters. Everything formal and protected. Done. My lawyers will draw up whatever you need. Adrian pulled out his phone, already making notes. What else? I want regular schedules for your visits. Not just whenever you feel like showing up, but actual planned times so the twins can anticipate seeing you. Consistency matters for children their age. Agreed. I'll work around whatever schedule you set. And Adrian? Elena met his eyes. I want honesty. If something happens in your world that might affect them, I need to know immediately. No protecting me from harsh realities or making unilateral decisions. We're partners in this, or we're nothing. Partners. Adrian tested the word. I can do that. Even when the truth is ugly, even when it makes you question trusting me, I'll be honest. You have my word. They hammered out details for another hour, establishing boundaries and expectations that would govern their new reality. It felt surreal, negotiating co-parenting with a man she'd fled 3 years ago, creating structure for a family that hadn't existed 48 hours earlier. When they finished, Adrian looked almost hopeful. Can I take them to lunch? There's a diner nearby, nothing fancy, just a chance to spend more time with them. Elena hesitated, maternal instinct warring with the agreement they'd just made. They've had a lot of disruption. Maybe something calmer? I could make lunch here, if that's okay. I'm actually a decent cook when circumstances require it. The image of Adrian Cross cooking lunch for toddlers was so incongruous that Elena almost laughed. You cook? I survived 4 years overseas managing territory before taking over the family business. Learning to feed myself was necessary. A slight smile touched his lips. I make excellent grilled cheese. Marcus loves grilled cheese. Then it's settled. I'll cook. You supervise. The twins can help. Family lunch. The word family hung between them, weighted with possibility and terror in equal measure. Was that what they were becoming? A family? Or just people bound by biology and circumstances playing at normalcy while danger circled? Lunch turned into an unexpectedly pleasant chaos. Adrian did indeed make excellent grilled cheese, letting Marcus help butter bread while Alessia carefully arranged tomato slices. Elena watched them work, seeing her son's complete trust and her daughter's gradual warming to this man who wanted so badly to be their father. Mama, look! I'm cooking! Marcus announced proudly. I see that, baby. You're doing great! Daddy says when I'm bigger, he'll teach me to make fancy food, like pasta from scratch. Adrian caught Elena's eye over Marcus's head, seeking approval for promises he was making. She nodded slightly, accepting that this was their reality now.
Adrian making plans, building connections, integrating himself into lives he'd been absent from. They ate at the massive dining table, the twins chattering about everything and nothing, while adults listened with the particular attention parents give their children's observations. Alessia demonstrated her ability to count to 20. Marcus explained his theory about why clouds were actually dinosaur breath. Normal, mundane, the kind of family meal that happened in households across the world. Except one parent was a crime lord who'd just destroyed an organization overnight, and the other was a woman who'd fled that world in terror. Some normalcy was genuine, some was performance. Elena couldn't always tell which was which. After lunch, exhaustion caught up with the twins. They'd been running on excitement and disrupted routines for 2 days, and their little bodies finally demanded rest. Elena tucked them into the massive bed in the guest room, their small forms nearly lost in the expansive space. "Is this our house now?" Alessia asked sleepily. "For a little while, baby, until we figure out what comes next." "I like it here. It's big and safe and Daddy's here." The casual way Alessia said it broke something in Elena's chest. Her daughter, who'd gone her entire life without a father, had accepted Adrian with the swift certainty of children who needed to trust in order to survive. "You like him?" Elena asked softly. "He's nice, and he looks sad sometimes, like he needs hugs. But when we're playing, he smiles for real." Alessia's eyes drifted closed. "Love you, Mama." "Love you too, baby." Elena found Adrian in the living room, staring out the window at the manicured grounds. He looked alone in a way that had nothing to do with physical isolation. "They're asleep," she said quietly. "Good. They needed rest." Adrian didn't turn around. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Okay." "Do you think they'll ever really see me as their father? Or will I always be the stranger who showed up and complicated everything?" The vulnerability in the question surprised her. Adrian Cross, who commanded empires and inspired fear, was worried about whether 2-year-olds would accept him. They already see you as their father. That's the easy part for them. They've been waiting their whole lives for someone to fill that role. Elena moved to stand beside him. The harder question is whether they'll grow up respecting the man you are or resenting what you represent. "And what do I represent to them?" "Right now, safety and attention and someone who does funny voices. But eventually they'll understand what you do, who you are, the choices you make. That's when it gets complicated." Adrian nodded slowly. "I want to be better. For them. I want to be the kind of man they can be proud of, instead of frightened by." "Then be better. Not through grand gestures or dramatic changes, but through consistent daily choices. Be present. Be honest. Be gentle when you can, and explain when you can't. Be the father they deserve, instead of the crime lord everyone expects." "Can those two things coexist? Can I be both?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But if anyone can figure out how to balance impossible contradictions, it's probably you." They stood in silence, watching afternoon sunlight paint patterns across the grounds. Two people bound by children they'd created, trying to navigate a future neither had anticipated. "I got a call this morning," Adrian said eventually, "from my mother. She wants to meet them." Elena's stomach dropped. "Victoria. She's their grandmother. She has rights. She has no rights. She drove me away with her contempt and her certainty that I wasn't good enough. She doesn't get to suddenly decide she wants access to my children. Our children. And Elena, I know what she did, how she made you feel, but she's genuinely remorseful. She wants a chance to make things right." "By what? Throwing money at us? Proving she was right all along about me needing her resources?" Elena's voice rose. "No, absolutely not. I won't expose the twins to someone who will make them feel less than because their mother wasn't born into the right family." "She won't. I've made it clear that any repeat of her past behavior means she never sees them again. She understands the stakes." Adrian turned to face her. "I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to let her try to earn forgiveness. For the twins' sake. They deserve to know their entire family. Their entire family includes someone who called me a distraction that needed eliminating. And that someone has spent 3 years living with that choice, watching me become harder and more isolated, wondering if she destroyed the one genuine connection I had." Adrian's voice softened. "She's not a warm person, Elena. She never will be. But she loves fiercely when she allows herself to, and I think she could love Alessia and Marcus if given the chance." Elena wanted to refuse. wanted to protect her children from the woman who'd made her feel worthless. But she saw the hope in Adrian's expression, the desire for his mother to be part of this family he was building. One meeting, supervised. Here, where I control the environment, and the second she makes them feel less than, it's over. Relief flooded Adrian's features. Thank you. I'll set it up for next week. Give everyone time to prepare. And Adrian, you need to tell her that this isn't about her comfort or her approval. This is about being a grandmother who adds value to her grandchildren's lives. If she can't do that, we don't need her. I'll make it clear. Adrian pulled out his phone. I should call her now before I lose my nerve. Elena left him to his conversation, checking on the twins who still slept peacefully. She had a week to prepare for confronting the woman who'd haunted her nightmares for 3 years. A week to steel herself for Victoria Cross's judgment and condescension. A week to hope that maybe, somehow, people really could change. The days that followed fell into unexpected rhythm. Adrian visited daily, reading stories and playing games and learning the minutiae of his children's lives with focused intensity. Elena watched him transform from uncertain stranger to engaged father, absorbing information about Alessia's favorite color and Marcus's fear of the dark with the same attention he probably gave to business intelligence. He was good at this, she realized, better than she'd expected. Patient when the twins were difficult, creative with entertainment, genuinely interested in their observations about the world. He researched child development, asked Elena questions about routines and discipline, approached fatherhood like a subject to be mastered. You're studying them, she observed one afternoon while Adrian helped Alessia with a puzzle. Of course. I've missed 2 years. I have a lot to catch up on. He didn't look up from the puzzle piece he was examining. Did you know toddlers can understand about 50% more than they can verbalize? It's fascinating. You're reading parenting books. Several. The research is quite extensive. Adrian finally glanced at her. Is that wrong? No, it's just unexpected. Most fathers wing it. I don't know how to wing anything. I strategize and research and plan. Parenting shouldn't be different just because the stakes are higher. Elena found herself smiling despite everything. The stakes being their entire emotional development and future mental health. Exactly. Far too important to approach casually. Adrian returned to the puzzle. Alessia, what do you think about this piece? Does the color match? That's the sky. It goes here. Alessia placed it with confidence. You're absolutely right. Well done. Watching them together, Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, and not trust, but maybe the beginning of hope that this impossible situation might somehow work. The meeting with Victoria was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. Adrian arrived early, his tension visible in the set of his shoulders. She's nervous, he said to Elena. She'd never admit it, but she's terrified you'll deny her access. I'm terrified she'll be exactly who she was 3 years ago. Then we're all terrified. Should make for an excellent afternoon. Adrian's attempt at humor fell flat. Victoria Cross arrived precisely on time, emerging from a black sedan with the same regal bearing Elena remembered. She'd aged in 3 years, silver hair more prominent, lines deeper around her eyes. But her spine was steel straight, her expression carefully neutral as she approached the house. Elena. Victoria's voice was controlled, giving nothing away. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Mrs. Cross. Victoria, please. A slight softening. I think we're past formalities. Adrian ushered his mother inside, his body language protective of both women. The twins appeared from the playroom, curious about the visitor. Victoria's composure cracked. Her hand went to her mouth, tears filling her eyes as she stared at Alicia and Marcus. They're beautiful, she whispered. Adrian, they're absolutely beautiful. Alessia, Marcus, this is Victoria. She's my mother, which makes her your grandmother. Like Grandma in the storybook? Marcus asked. Exactly like that. Victoria crouched down with surprising grace. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you both. Alessia studied her with characteristic wariness. Why didn't you come before? The question hit its mark. Victoria glanced at Elena, something that looked like shame crossing her features. Because I made mistakes. I wasn't kind to your mother when I should have been, and that created distance between all of us. Victoria's voice stayed steady despite obvious emotion. I'm hoping to do better now, if you'll give me a chance. Mama says people get chances if they're sorry for real, not just saying words. Your mother is very wise.
Victoria's eyes met Elena's, and she's right. I am sorry, for real. More sorry than I have words to express. The afternoon proceeded with careful civility. Victoria brought gifts despite Elena's request otherwise, books, art supplies, nothing ostentatious but clearly chosen with thought. She played with the twins, asked questions about their interests, showed genuine engagement that surprised Elena. When the twins returned to their playroom, Victoria turned to Elena with visible effort. I owe you an apology. A real one, not deflected through Adrian. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. I was cruel 3 years ago. I judged you based on circumstances rather than character. I made you feel worthless when you were anything but, and in doing so, I drove away the woman my son loved and cost myself 3 years with my grandchildren. Elena hadn't expected this, hadn't expected vulnerability or genuine remorse from the woman who'd seemed so certain of her superiority. You called me a distraction that needed eliminating. I called you a complication I didn't know how to handle. Adrian was becoming someone I didn't recognize, softer, happier, more human. I was afraid that meant he was becoming weak. Victoria's voice dropped. I was wrong. He wasn't becoming weak. He was becoming whole. And I destroyed that because I couldn't see past my own fears. You made me run. You made me so terrified of what my children would become in your world that I chose poverty over asking for help. I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Victoria met her eyes. I can't undo the past, but I'm asking for a chance to be part of their future. Not as the matriarch demanding respect, but as a grandmother who wants to know her grandchildren, who wants to support their mother instead of undermining her, who wants to prove that people can change when they have sufficient motivation. Elena studied her, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda. All she found was exhaustion and hope and the same fierce love for Adrian and the twins that drove Elena's own choices. One chance, Elena said finally. You get one chance to prove you mean what you're saying. But Victoria, if you ever make my children feel less than, if you ever suggest they're lacking because of who their mother is, you'll disappear and I'll never see them again. I understand. Victoria's voice firmed, and I accept those terms. They're fair, given what I've done. Adrian had been watching from the doorway, hope and fear warring on his face. So we're doing this? Actual family gatherings and grandmother visits? We're trying, Elena corrected. No guarantees, just effort and honesty and seeing what develops. That's all I ask. Victoria stood. I should go. I don't want to overstay this first meeting. But Elena, thank you for giving me this chance when I didn't deserve it. After Victoria left, Adrian collapsed onto the couch with visible relief. That went better than I expected. The bar was pretty low. Fair point. He laughed quietly. But she meant it, the apology, the regret, all of it. My mother doesn't do vulnerability well, but when she does, it's genuine. Elena sat beside him, exhaustion from the emotional weight of the afternoon catching up. We're really doing this, aren't we? Building some kind of family from people who barely know each other. Families are always built from people who barely know each other initially. We're just doing it in reverse order. Adrian glanced toward the playroom where the twins played, and somehow, against all odds, it seems to be working. For now. This is still the honeymoon phase. Wait until reality sets in. I'll take honeymoon phase over open warfare. Adrian's voice softened. Elena, I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you're making compromises and accepting situations you'd rather avoid. But thank you. For trying. For giving us all a chance to be better than our worst choices. Elena didn't have words for the complexity of emotions swirling through her chest, fear and hope and exhaustion, and the tentative beginning of something that might become trust if given enough time. So instead of speaking, she just nodded. And in the playroom, their children laughed, oblivious to the careful architecture of family being constructed around them. For now, that was enough. The Brooklyn penthouse turned out to be everything Adrian had promised, and nothing Elena had feared. 3 bedrooms with actual closet space, windows that let in morning light, a kitchen where she could cook without turning sideways. The twins had their own rooms for the first time in their lives, though they still ended up sleeping together most nights. Creatures of habit seeking comfort in proximity. Elena stood in the living room 3 weeks after Victoria's visit, watching afternoon sun paint golden patterns across hardwood floors. The space felt too large, too nice, too much like accepting charity, even though the legal documents clearly stated it was hers, not Adrian's property she occupied, but her own lease with terms that protected her autonomy. You're overthinking again. Adrian's voice came from the doorway where he'd materialized with his characteristic silence. I thought you weren't coming until dinner. Meeting ended early. Figured I'd stop by, see if you needed anything. He held up a bag. Brought Marcus those dinosaur figurines he was talking about. The scientifically accurate ones. Adrian, we talked about excessive gifts. 3 small plastic dinosaurs for a kid obsessed with paleontology isn't excessive. It's basic parenting. He set the bag on the counter. Where are they? Napping. They had a big morning at the park.
Adrian's expression softened the way it always did when discussing the twins. 3 weeks of consistent presence had transformed him from stranger to fixture in their lives. He knew Alessia hated peas but loved broccoli. He knew Marcus needed his blanket positioned exactly right for naps. He knew both of them could delay bedtime indefinitely through elaborate negotiation tactics. He'd become a father, not just biologically, but functionally. And Elena was still processing what that meant. Can we talk? Adrian asked, settling onto the couch with the ease of someone who'd earned his place there. About what? About the offer that came yesterday, the one you've been avoiding discussing. Elena's stomach tightened. The offer. Jonathan Reeves, one of Adrian's business associates, the legitimate ones, ran a non-profit providing medical care to underserved communities. He'd approached Elena directly about a position as their nursing director, managing teams and programs instead of working night shifts at a clinic that barely paid rent. It was everything she'd wanted professionally. Better pay, meaningful work, regular hours that meant she could actually be present for the twins' waking lives. The kind of opportunity she'd have pursued immediately if it hadn't come through Adrian's connections. I'm thinking about it. You're avoiding it because you don't want to accept anything that might have my fingerprints on it. Adrian's voice stayed neutral. Elena, I didn't arrange this. Jonathan approached you based on your qualifications and his genuine need for someone with your skills. I didn't ask him to offer you the position. But you told him about me. I mentioned in passing that the mother of my children had nursing background and was overqualified for her current role. He did his own research, reviewed your credentials, made his own decision. Adrian met her eyes. This isn't charity or manipulation. It's an actual job offer based on actual merit. That happened to materialize right after we moved into this building you own. Everything in my life connects to everything else. That's how networks work. But Elena, you can't reject every opportunity just because it might have some tangential connection to me. That's not protecting your independence. That's limiting your potential out of stubbornness. The accusation stung because it held truth. Elena had been so focused on maintaining boundaries that she'd started viewing every good thing as a trap. What if I take the job and it doesn't work out? What if Jonathan only offered it because of you and I'm actually terrible at it? Then you find something else. But you won't be terrible at it. You're exceptional at everything you do. You raise 2 children alone in poverty while working multiple jobs and they're happy, healthy, thriving. You think managing nursing programs is harder than that? It's different skills. It's the same core competency, caring about people and figuring out how to help them despite limited resources. Adrian leaned forward. Take the job, Elena. Not because I want you to, but because you want to. Because it's the opportunity you deserve. She wanted to keep arguing, keep finding reasons to refuse, but exhaustion from working nights while single parenting was catching up to her. The offer represented a chance to use her education, to make real impact, to have a career instead of just survival jobs. I'll call Jonathan tomorrow, she said quietly. Good. Relief crossed Adrian's features. Now, different topic. We need to discuss custody arrangements formally. Elena's defenses immediately activated. We have arrangements. You visit regularly, spend time with them. You're involved. What needs formalizing? Legal documentation. Not because I don't trust you, but because they deserve the security of knowing exactly where they stand. Adrian pulled out papers from his jacket. I had my lawyers draw this up. Joint legal custody, primary physical custody with you, visitation schedule we've already been following, financial support clearly outlined. Everything protected legally, so there's no ambiguity. Elena took the document, scanning terms that seemed more than fair. More than fair, actually. They gave her final authority on major decisions while ensuring Adrian's parental rights were protected. Why does this feel like you're preparing for something?
Because I am. I'm preparing for the reality that my world is dangerous and unpredictable. If something happens to me, I want it crystal clear that the twins are provided for and you have uncontested custody. No family members swooping in claiming rights, no legal battles, just clean documentation. The casual way he discussed his potential death sent ice through Elena's veins. Adrian, I'm being practical. Men in my position don't usually retire peacefully. I'm taking steps to legitimize my operations, transition into legal business, but that takes time. Meanwhile, I need to ensure that if the worst happens, you and the twins are protected. He gestured to the documents. These guarantee that, plus a trust fund that activates if I die, life insurance, property transfers, everything to ensure they never struggle the way you did. I don't want your death money. It's not death money. It's responsible parenting. Adrian's voice firmed. Elena, I know you want to believe we can just exist in this bubble where my world never intrudes. But Petrov proved that's not reality. There are threats, consequences, dangers I can't completely eliminate. The best I can do is prepare for them. Elena set down the papers, her hands shaking slightly. I don't want to think about you dying. The twins just got you. They're finally stable and happy and feeling secure. Don't ask me to prepare for losing that. I'm not planning on dying. I'm planning on living long enough to walk Alicia down the aisle and teach Marcus to drive and meet grandchildren someday. Adrian's expression softened. But I'm also not naive enough to think I control everything. So I'm covering bases, making sure that whatever happens, you three are protected. She wanted to argue, wanted to reject the whole conversation. But she'd spent 3 years living with uncertainty, never knowing if she'd have enough for rent or if the twins would need medical care she couldn't afford. Adrian was offering the opposite, absolute security regardless of what happened. I'll review them with my own lawyer, make sure everything's actually as fair as it looks. Good. That's smart. Don't trust my lawyers completely, even though I've instructed them to protect your interests. Adrian stood. Now, I should probably go before the twins wake up, and I get roped into elaborate pretend games involving dinosaur tea parties. You love the dinosaur tea parties. I tolerate them for Marcus's benefit, Adrian corrected with mock seriousness. There's a difference. You made sound effects last time, roaring and stomping. That was purely for atmospheric accuracy. He was fighting a smile. I take my dinosaur portrayal seriously. Elena laughed despite everything, the normalcy of the conversation, a stark contrast to the heavy topics they'd just navigated. This was their pattern now, oscillating between intense discussions about danger and death and casual banter about their children's imaginative play. Adrian was halfway to the door when Elena's voice stopped him. Thank you. For the custody documents, for being honest about risks, for all of it. I know I don't say it enough, but I appreciate what you're trying to do. You don't owe me thanks for being a parent to my own children. I owe you acknowledgement that you're doing it well, better than I expected, better than I thought possible, honestly. Something vulnerable flickered across Adrian's expression. That might be the nicest thing you've said to me in 3 years. Don't let it go to your head. Too late. I'm going to treasure this moment forever. His smile turned genuine. Call Jonathan about the job. And Elena? Stop punishing yourself for accepting good things. You've earned them. He left before she could respond, the apartment suddenly feeling emptier despite the space. Elena called Jonathan Reeves the next morning and accepted the position. Her start date was set for 2 weeks out, time to transition from the clinic and prepare for the new role. The night she told Adrian, he showed up with champagne, the real stuff, not the cheap sparkling wine she'd pretended to enjoy when they were together before, and insisted they celebrate properly. To new beginnings, Adrian toasted, the twins already asleep in their respective rooms. To terrifying leaps of faith, Elena corrected, clinking her glass against his. They drank in comfortable silence, the kind that had developed over weeks of co-parenting and negotiating this strange new relationship. Elena studied Adrian over the rim of her glass, seeing exhaustion and satisfaction in equal measure. How's the transition going? The legitimizing of operations you mentioned? Adrian's expression turned cautious. You really want to know? You promised honesty. I'm asking for it. It's complicated. Some of my people are adapting well, shifting into legal business operations. Others are resistant, viewing it as weakness. I'm having to make hard choices about who stays and who goes. He paused. I've already had 3 attempts to undermine the transition.
One required significant intervention to resolve. Intervention meaning violence. Intervention meaning strategic removal of obstacles. I'm trying to minimize bloodshed, but some situations only have harsh solutions. Adrian met her eyes. I told you I'd be honest, even when the truth is ugly. That's the ugly truth. I'm trying to change, but change requires breaking things that resist transformation. Elena processed this, the champagne suddenly tasting bitter. Will it ever really be over? The violence, the danger, the constant threat? Not completely, but it can be managed, minimized, controlled to the point where it doesn't touch you, or the twins. Adrian set down his glass. I'm building something different, Elena, an empire that operates in daylight instead of shadows. It'll take years, maybe decades, but I'm committed to it. For them. For the legacy I want to leave. What changed? You spent 20 years building power in the darkness. What made you suddenly want daylight? Emerald eyes and matching dimples. Adrian's voice went soft. The realization that my children deserve a father they can be proud of instead of frightened by. That's what changed. They changed everything. The admission hung between them, raw and honest, in a way that made Elena's chest tight. I want to believe that, she whispered. I want to believe people can fundamentally change when they have sufficient motivation. But Adrian, I've seen what you're capable of. I've heard the stories, witnessed the fear you inspire. Can that person really transform into someone who operates in daylight? I don't know, Adrian admitted, but I'm going to try. Every day I'm going to make choices that move me closer to being worthy of them. Some days I'll succeed, some days I'll fail, but I'm committed to the effort. And if you can't, if the darkness is too ingrained, then I remove myself from their daily lives while still ensuring their protection and support. I become the father who loves them from a distance rather than the father who corrupts them through proximity. Adrian's jaw clenched. I won't let them become what I am, Elena. That's the one absolute. Whatever I have to sacrifice to prevent that, I will. Elena studied him, seeing truth in every line of his face. He meant it. This wasn't performance or manipulation. Adrian was genuinely prepared to remove himself from his children's lives if he believed his presence would harm them. The realization shifted something fundamental in her perception. You really love them. More than I knew it was possible to love anything. More than empire or power or self-preservation. Adrian's voice roughened. They're the best thing I've ever created, and I had nothing to do with creating them. That's the beautiful irony. My greatest achievement is entirely your doing, and all I can do is try not to destroy it. You're not destroying it. You're building it. Every story you read, every game you play, every moment you show up and engage, you're building their trust and their security and their understanding that they matter. I'm terrified I'll ruin them. That one wrong choice, one moment of reverting to old patterns, will show them who I really am, and they'll never look at me the same way. Elena recognized the fear because she lived with it too. The constant worry that she'd make the wrong parenting decision and somehow damage these small humans who trusted her completely. Welcome to parenting, she said softly. We're all terrified we'll ruin them. The difference is whether we let that fear paralyze us or motivate us to be better. You make it look effortless. I cry in the shower at least twice a week from the stress of getting it wrong. Adrian laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. Really? Really? Last week Alicia asked why she couldn't have a daddy who lived with us like her friend Emma's daddy, and I cried for 20 minutes trying to explain complicated adult situations to a 2-year-old brain. Parenting is beautiful and terrifying and mostly just showing up even when you have no idea what you're doing. That's oddly comforting. Good. Because you're doing fine, Adrian. Better than fine. You're doing the work, making the effort, showing up consistently. That's what they'll remember, not your past or your mistakes, but the father who was present. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Marcus's recent obsession with construction vehicles. Alessia's declaration that she wanted to be an astronaut doctor artist when she grew up. The logistics of their upcoming week. Normal parenting discussions that felt surreal given who was having them. It was past midnight when Adrian finally left, and Elena found herself standing at the window watching his car disappear into Brooklyn traffic. They'd come so far in a month, from strangers to co-parents to something that almost resembled friendship. The foundations were forming. Whether they'd support something lasting remained to be seen. 2 months later, winter had settled over New York with the kind of bitter cold that made the penthouse's heated floors a luxury Elena no longer questioned accepting. Her job at the nonprofit was everything she'd hoped: challenging, meaningful, exactly the kind of work she'd dreamed of doing. The twins had adjusted to their new daycare, made friends, thrived in the stability Adrian's resources provided. Victoria had become a weekly presence, arriving every Sunday for family dinner with the awkward determination of someone trying to make amends. She'd never be warm, would never be the grandmother who baked cookies and told silly stories. But she was present, engaged, making genuine effort to know her grandchildren and support their mother. It was progress. Slow, imperfect, but real. The call came on a Wednesday evening while Elena was helping the twins build an elaborate blanket fort. Adrian's name flashed on her screen, and something in the timing made her stomach clench. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right, but I need to discuss it with you in person. Can I come over?" "Now?" "If possible. It's important." 20 minutes later, Adrian arrived with Chinese takeout and an expression Elena couldn't quite read, nervous and hopeful and slightly terrified all at once. "Daddy!" Marcus launched himself at Adrian's legs. "We made a fort! You have to see it!" "I will absolutely see this fort, but first I need to talk to your mama about grown-up stuff. Can you and Alicia be fort architects for a few minutes?" "Okay, but don't take too long. The fort might collapse." "I'll be quick," Adrian promised. Once the twins were occupied, Adrian set down the food and turned to Elena with visible effort at composure. "I've finalized the transition. As of yesterday, all illegal operations are either shut down or transferred to other families. My businesses are completely legitimate: real estate, investments, technology ventures, everything legal, everything documented, everything operating in daylight." Elena's breath caught. "You actually did it." "I actually did it. It cost me alliances, required some brutal negotiations, and I made enemies who'll hold grudges forever. But it's done." Adrian's voice was steady despite the magnitude of what he was saying. "I'm out. Completely out of the criminal enterprises that defined my life for 20 years. "Adrian, that's—" Elena struggled for words. "That's incredible. And terrifying. Are you safe? Are the twins safe?" "Safer than we were before. I've maintained enough connections and leverage to ensure protection, but I'm no longer actively in the life. No more territory disputes, no more violence, no more operating in shadows." He paused. "I did it for them, so they could have a father who isn't defined by fear and blood. So when they're old enough to ask what I do, I can tell them truth they won't have to hide from." Elena felt tears burning her eyes. "You gave up everything." "I gave up darkness for a chance at light. That's not sacrifice, that's evolution." Adrian's expression turned vulnerable. "But I need you to understand what this means. My income is significantly reduced. My power is diminished. My reputation is shifting from feared crime lord to legitimate businessman. Everything that made me Adrian Cross is changing." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need to know if you can accept who I'm becoming instead of just tolerating who I was. If we're going to co-parent long-term, if we're going to build this family we're creating, I need to know you see the changes as real and not just performance." Elena studied him, seeing exhaustion and hope, and the kind of vulnerability that must have cost him dearly to show. "I see the changes. I see you reading bedtime stories and making dinosaur sounds, and showing up even when you're clearly exhausted from whatever battles you fought that day. I see you trying to be better than your worst choices. I see you choosing them over empire." She paused. "And Adrian, I'm proud of you. Genuinely, truly proud." His composure cracked. "That might be the first time anyone said that to me and meant it. Well, get used to it, because you're doing hard things, and they deserve acknowledgement." Adrian pulled her into a hug that started tentative and turned fierce. Elena let herself lean into it, accepting comfort and connection she'd been afraid to want. They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who'd been strangers and enemies and were slowly becoming something else. "Daddy! Mama! The fort is ready!" Alessia's voice broke the moment. They pulled apart, both slightly flushed and emotional. "Duty calls," Elena said softly. "Indeed it does." Adrian cleared his throat. "Lead me to this architectural marvel." The fort was indeed elaborate. Pillows and blankets arranged with the kind of creative chaos only toddlers could achieve. Adrian dutifully crawled inside, pronounced it excellent, and spent the next hour playing whatever game the twins invented involving dragons and superheroes and dinosaurs, all somehow coexisting. Elena watched from the doorway, her heart full in a way she hadn't experienced in years. This was family. Imperfect, unconventional, built from broken pieces and careful negotiation. But family, nonetheless. Later, after the twins were asleep and Adrian was preparing to leave, Elena stopped him at the door. "Would you want to have dinner? Actual dinner, just us? Somewhere that isn't Chinese takeout in a blanket fort?" Adrian froze. "Like a date?" "Like two adults who have children together, figuring out if they could be something more than co-parents." Elena's voice trembled slightly. "No pressure, no expectations, just exploring possibility." "Elena, I don't want you to feel obligated because I changed my life. You don't owe me romance or relationship just because I'm trying to be better." "I'm not asking out of obligation. I'm asking because I want to know the man you're becoming, not just the father you are to our children. Because 3 years ago I ran from someone who scared me, but maybe the person you're choosing to be now is someone I could trust." Adrian's expression transformed with hope so naked it hurt to witness. "Saturday? I know a place. Nothing fancy, just good food and conversation." "Saturday works." He left with a smile that made him look younger, lighter, like possibility was something he'd remembered how to believe in. Saturday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation Elena hadn't felt since she was 23 and falling for a man she didn't fully understand. Victoria arrived to watch the twins with an expression that suggested she knew exactly what this dinner represented. "You look beautiful," Victoria said quietly. "And Elena, whatever happens tonight, thank you for giving him a chance to be better, for seeing the man he's trying to become instead of just the monster he was. He was never a monster to me, just dangerous and impossible to navigate. And now? Now he's still dangerous and impossible, but in different ways." Elena smiled. "We'll see what that means." The restaurant was intimate without being romantic, the kind of place that specialized in excellent food and quiet conversation. Adrian was already there when she arrived, dressed casually, but with the kind of care that suggested he'd agonized over the choice. "Hi," he said, standing as she approached. "Hi yourself." They settled into the kind of conversation that felt simultaneously first date awkward and comfortable friendship easy. 3 months of co-parenting had given them foundation, but exploring each other beyond that context required different navigation. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Elena requested over appetizers. "I play piano, taught myself when I was 15 because my father said music was weakness. I still play sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep." "I had no idea." "I don't advertise it. The feared crime lord playing Chopin doesn't exactly fit the brand." Adrian smiled. "Your turn. Tell me something." "I wanted to be a surgeon once. Not just a doctor, but specifically a trauma surgeon. I loved the idea of having seconds to make decisions that saved lives." "You could still do that. Go back to school. Finish your degree." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, helping communities get access to care instead of just treating individuals." Different impact, equally meaningful. They talked for hours, discovering shared interests and fundamental differences, learning each other outside the context of their children. Adrian was funnier than Elena remembered, his dry wit emerging when he wasn't maintaining the persona of power. She was fiercer than he'd known, her convictions and principles creating boundaries he found himself respecting rather than trying to cross. "Can I ask you something potentially awkward?" Adrian ventured over dessert. "Depends on the question. Do you ever regret it? Running, hiding the pregnancy, choosing the path you did? If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you do it differently?" Elena considered carefully. "I regret that you missed their first 2 years. I regret the poverty and stress that could have been avoided. But I don't regret protecting them from the world I thought would destroy them. That choice, even if it was based on incomplete understanding, came from love." "That's fair. Do you regret the man you were? The choices that made me run?" "Every day, but I'm trying to make peace with the fact that I can't undo the past. Only choose better going forward." Adrian met her eyes. "I spent 20 years becoming someone formidable and alone. I'm spending however long it takes becoming someone worthy of the family I didn't know I wanted. And if I told you I'm starting to see that person, that the man sitting across from me might be someone I could trust with more than just co-parenting?" Hope flickered across Adrian's expression.
I'd say I'm terrified of disappointing you again, but I'm willing to try if you are. I'm willing to try. Slowly, carefully, with full knowledge that we're both different people than we were. No promises beyond seeing what develops. I can work with that.
Adrian reached across the table, his hand palm up in invitation. Elena placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and possibility of the gesture. 3 years ago, she'd fled this man in terror. Now she was choosing to stay, to explore, to see if the pieces of their broken history could be rebuilt into something new. The months that followed were careful reconstruction. Adrian and Elena dated the way teenagers did, movies and dinners and long conversations that built understanding. They included the twins in activities, creating family experiences that felt natural rather than forced. Victoria became not just a grandmother, but a tentative ally, her sharp edges softening as she witnessed the family taking shape. Adrian's legitimate businesses thrived, his strategic mind as effective in legal ventures as it had been in illegal ones. The nonprofit where Elena worked expanded its programs, her leadership driving impact that reached thousands. The twins grew and developed, secure in the knowledge that both parents loved them and were present. Spring arrived with the kind of bright warmth that made Central Park irresistible. Adrian had planned an elaborate picnic, not the blanket on the ground version, but the kind with an actual table and real food and enough organization to suggest professional assistance. "This is excessive," Elena observed as they settled at a table near Bethesda Fountain. "I prefer thoughtfully planned." Adrian helped Alessia into her chair. "Besides, we're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" 1 year. 1 year since I found you on that bench, and everything changed." Elena blinked back sudden tears. Had it really been a year? 12 months since that encounter that had shattered her carefully constructed isolation and rebuilt her life into something she never could have imagined? "A lot has changed," she agreed softly. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." They ate and laughed and watched the twins chase pigeons with the fearless enthusiasm of 3-year-olds convinced they could befriend any creature. Normal family activities that would have seemed impossible a year ago. After lunch, while the twins played nearby under Victoria's watchful eye, Adrian turned to Elena with visible nervousness. "I have something to ask you, something important." Elena's heart started racing. "Okay?" "This past year has been transformative. You've given me opportunities I didn't deserve, chances to prove I could be better, space to become someone worthy of you and the twins. And I hope, I've shown that the changes are real and lasting." "Adrian, where is this going?" "To a proposal. Not the kind you're probably anticipating, but an important one nonetheless." He pulled out papers from his jacket. "I want to marry you. Not for romance, though I'm hoping that continues developing. Not for love, though I'm already most of the way there. But for protection, legitimacy, and giving the twins the security of parents who are legally united." Elena's breath caught. "You're proposing marriage as a practical arrangement?" "I'm proposing marriage as a foundation for everything else we're building. Legal protection that ensures if something happens to me, you're my widow with all attendant rights and resources. Social legitimacy that gives the twins a conventional family structure. Formal commitment that proves I'm all in on this family we're creating." Adrian's voice gentled. "The romantic feelings, the genuine love, the partnership beyond co-parenting, I believe those are coming. But I'm not waiting for perfect circumstances. I'm asking you to marry me now, as we are, with honesty about what it means and doesn't mean." Elena stared at him, processing the most unromantic proposal in history that somehow still made her heart race. "You want to marry me for practical reasons. I want to marry you because you're the mother of my children, the woman I'm falling in love with all over again, and the person I trust to build a future with. The practical benefits are real, but they're not the whole story." Adrian met her eyes. "I'm not going to get down on one knee or make grand declarations. I'm just going to tell you the truth. I want to spend my life proving I'm worthy of you. I want to be your husband, their father, the man who shows up every day regardless of circumstances. And I want the legal and social structure that supports all of that." "This is insane." "Probably, but we've never been conventional." Adrian pulled out a ring box. "This was my grandmother's. The only cross-family heirloom I actually value. Victoria gave it to me last month when I told her what I was planning. The ring was beautiful, vintage, understated. the kind of peace that spoke of history and meaning rather than ostentatious display. I don't know what to say. Say yes if you trust that we can build something real. Say no if you need more time. Say maybe if you want to think about it. But Elena, know that whatever you choose, I'm committed to you and the twins regardless. This is about formalizing what already exists, not creating obligation. Elena looked at the ring, at Adrian's hopeful expression, at the twins playing nearby with Victoria, her family, imperfect and unconventional and built from the wreckage of past mistakes. Yes, she heard herself say. Not because it's practical or because I'm completely certain, but because I want to try. I want to see if we can build something that lasts. I want to give the twins the family they deserve. I want to marry you, Adrian Cross, and see what forever looks like. Relief and joy transformed Adrian's face. He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then pulled her into a kiss that was gentle and promising and full of possibility. "Daddy's kissing Mama!" Marcus's delighted shout broke the moment. "Does this mean you're getting married?" Alicia asked with the blunt directness of a 3-year-old. "Yes," Adrian confirmed, not taking his eyes off Elena. "It means we're going to be a real family, all of us together." "Finally," Alicia declared. "All my friends have parents who are married. Now we're normal." Elena laughed through happy tears. Normal. Their family would never be normal by conventional standards, but maybe that was okay. Maybe normal was overrated, and what mattered was love and commitment and the daily choice to show up for each other. The wedding happened 6 weeks later in a small ceremony that honored both formality and intimacy. Victoria cried openly, watching her son marry the woman she'd once dismissed. The twins served as ring bearers with the kind of chaotic enthusiasm that made guests laugh and cry simultaneously. Elena wore a simple dress that made her feel beautiful, and Adrian looked at her like she was the answer to questions he hadn't known to ask. Their vows were honest rather than flowery. Adrian promised to choose family over empire every day. Elena promised to trust the man he was becoming instead of fearing the man he'd been. They both promised to put the twins first, to communicate honestly, to build something lasting from their imperfect beginning. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. The years that followed brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Adrian's legitimate businesses flourished, his reputation slowly transforming from feared criminal to respected entrepreneur. Elena's nonprofit expanded nationally, her vision and leadership creating impact that changed countless lives. The twins grew into remarkable children, Alicia fierce and protective, Marcus gentle and creative, both secure in the knowledge that they were loved unconditionally. Victoria surprised everyone by becoming genuinely warm with her grandchildren, her reserved nature softening as she watched them grow. She established a foundation in her late husband's name that provided educational scholarships, channeling family wealth toward redemption rather than power. Adrian never fully escaped his past. Old enemies occasionally surfaced with grudges. Former associates sometimes tried to pull him back into darkness. But he navigated each challenge with the patient determination of someone who knew exactly what he was protecting. The twins never witnessed violence, never saw the darker side of their father's capabilities, never had reason to fear the man who read them stories, and attended their school events, and showed up consistently in ways that proved his transformation was real. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Elena and Adrian stood in the Brooklyn penthouse that had become home, watching Alessia and Marcus play in the living room. 8 years old now, confident and happy, arguing over some game with the comfortable certainty of siblings who knew they were safe. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked softly. "Saying yes to all this chaos?" "Never." "Do you regret changing everything for us?" "Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. First was walking through that park 5 years ago." Adrian wrapped his arm around her waist. "I found my family that day. Found everything I didn't know I was missing. We found each other, all of us." Elena leaned into him, "and built something worth fighting for." "Worth everything," Adrian agreed. They'd started with secrets and fear, with impossible circumstances and every reason to fail. But they'd chosen to stay, to fight, to build. They'd chosen each other repeatedly in small daily decisions and major life commitments. And in choosing, they'd created something that went beyond redemption or forgiveness. They'd created family, messy and imperfect and absolutely worth every sacrifice required to protect it. The twins' laughter filled the apartment, bright and joyful and secure. The sound of a different legacy, not one built on fear or power, but on love and second chances and the courage to become better than your worst choices. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.